Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Tuesday, June the 25th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's producing the program. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM. Which is 86-26, so a bit of a late night for hockey fans. Not sure what the ratings were for Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, but you feel like you have to stay up and watch the presentation of the Stanley Cup even after the final buzzer goes off. And the Oilers, unfortunately, come up short to lose 2-1. And the Panthers, their very first Stanley Cup, so put an end to the hockey season. I guess it's officially over now because the Hershey Bears also won the Calder Cup last night. That's their 13th. That's the most ever in the American Hockey League. A couple things. So Conn Smythe was awarded to Connor McDavid. No surprise, right? He led the playoffs in scoring with 42 points, just 5 shy of Gretzky's record. He broke Gretzky's assist record. You know, some people offering some consternation that he didn't come on the ice to receive the Conn Smythe trophy from the commissioner, Gary Bettman. I guess, you know, in the locker room with his own team, or the dressing room with his own team, and doing what captains are supposed to do. So I didn't really think it was that big a deal. But he's only the second non-goaltender to win the Conn Smythe. The first non-goaltender was Reggie Leach back in 1976. That year he scored 19 goals in 16 games. He scored in 10 straight. Both are records. The 19 goals beat Newsy Lalonde's record set in 1919. And then the 10 straight goal-scoring games beat Maurice Richard, whose record was then 7. So there's been other Roger Crozier, Glenn Hall, Ron Hextall, Jean-Sébastien Giguère, and now Connor McDavid off the losing side to win the Conn Smythe. All right, must win tonight for Canada at the Copa America, and they've got Peru. That's so Canada number 48 in the world, Peru number 31 in the world. We've got to win, and I think we're in with a shot. Okay. So, unsurprisingly, when DFO announced last Friday that the recreational food fishery will indeed open up a week from that day, and so it's June 29th that it opens up. All right, so whether it be the timing issue, but people are also justifiably talking about fairness. In other parts of the country, you know, the recreational food fisheries, 5 days or 7 days a week, go out whenever you want, and in this case, only 39 days, and reserved for Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So there's something to that. And just a gentle reminder, DFO is also asking people if you see or spot a shark to report it to DFO. So just that reminder, we've seen the videos over the years where someone's out jigging for cod, and they reach down to the water's edge to retrieve their cod as opposed to just pull it up over the gunnels and zoop, here comes a shark to take your cod. So don't reach into the water to grab your cod in a moment of excitement. All right, stick with the fishery for a second. A couple of things. So apparently 5 processing companies have what the union is called breaking away from the Association of Seafood Producers to sign a contract with the union based on the price put forward by the union, which was 40 cents compared to the 25 cents that was selected by the price-setting panel. So when the union says, you know, this looks like the fractures inside ASP and they're the stumbling block or the hindrance block to have a functioning fishery, of course ASP says it's completely nonsense. But the 5 processors that have signed this contract are the Barry Group, the Golden Shell Fisheries, Labrador Fishermen's Union Shrimp Company, Bay Robert Seafood, and Biotic Fish Processors. So I don't know if they've signed on for the full 40 cents per pound, but they have indeed signed a contract, so there will be a commercial capelin fishery this year. And in some corners, people think it's questionable as to whether or not there should be a commercial capelin fishery. It's a rollover from last year's quota, about 14,533 tonnes, over 29 million pounds of capelin. But anyway, interesting development that 5 processing companies have signed this contract. Also, we've had some concerns voiced by voting members of the FFAW about election integrity and the fact that the ballot is very nondescript. and no way to ensure that there are multiple people voting multiple times, those types of things. In an effort to get to the bottom of exactly what the protections are in place for the integrity of the election, the chair of the Elections Committee at the FFAW is going to come on the program this morning. So I obviously have some questions in mind for the representative, but if you want to add to it, you can send me a tweet or an email or whatever the case may be. But that's interesting. And also, there's lots of people still chiming in on calls we get about hook and release or catch and release of a wild Atlantic salmon, and whether or not this season we're going to see the continuation of these high temperatures in the salmon rivers and what that means for catch and release. If that's of interest to you, we can talk about it this morning. All right, for some monarchists in the province, disappointed to know that Princess Anne has suffered some minor injuries and concussions. She's currently in hospital at Southmead Hospital in Bristol and won't be making her way to the province for the 100th anniversary of the National War Memorial and, of course, the repatriation of the remains of the unknown soldier. Princess Anne, at 73, does have a couple of titles. They're honorary, albeit, but she's the Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, also the President of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. That's the entity that was in charge of the repatriation to begin with. So Princess Anne will not be here, and lots to discuss with that particular issue. Not necessarily Princess Anne's inability to make her way here. There's no real cause of the injuries that's been reported, but it looks like they are something possibly related to a horse-related incident, whether it be contact with the head or the legs of the horse. So possibly an equine-related injury for her. She was last here 8 years ago, 100th anniversary Beaumont Hamlet, of course. All right. We've had this conversation on the program with both the Mayor of Grand Falls, Windsor, and the doctor who's the medical chief for the Central Zone about the fact that there is indeed a family care centre in Grand Falls, Windsor, but 7 months after it was open, still no family doctors. Now, a bunch of different moving parts on that particular front. You know, there was a group of doctors that put forward a proposal that they would operate just a little bit differently than traditional full-time hire to work in this family care clinic or collaborative care clinic, and that proposal was rejected. So, again, it's fine and dandy to open up all of these collaborative care clinics, and the plan is to open 35 of them around the province, but staffing is obviously going to remain a prime concern here. Here's something inside the world of healthcare and the recruitment efforts that provinces across the country are putting forward. And this is about internationally trained doctors, whether they be originally citizens of the country trying to come back and the lack of residency positions, and or simply trained internationally, and what they talk about as a cumbersome, complex, lengthy and costly licensing requirements that they face upon trying to possibly deal with the province and say, okay, absolutely, I'd love to come practice in St. John's or in Cornerbrook or whatever the case may be, or Grand Falls, Windsor. Here's some comparisons from what it looked like in 2013 versus 2022. And this is the number of internationally educated healthcare professionals. We'll just break down a couple. So there's a ton of internationally trained healthcare workers in this country at this moment in time. For physicians, back in 2013, there was almost 20,000. That was 25% of the total supply of physicians. In 2022, it crept up to 27% of the total supply. Inside the world of family medicine, which of course is critically important, it was about 11,000 family medicine physicians. That was 28% of the total supply. It's crept up now to 31% of the total supply. In the world of regulated nurses, both nurse practitioners and registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, it was 8% of the total supply. Now it's crept up to 10% of the total supply. For psychiatric nurses, of course, we're still working towards amending the Healthcare Act here to allow for psychiatric nurses to be part of our delivery. In 2013, it was 7% of the total supply, and we don't have updated numbers on that front, but when I went to the association, they say it's probably more like 10%. Occupational therapists, around the same. Physiotherapists went from 13% of total supply in 2013 to 23% of total supply in 2022. Pharmacists, which represents the highest number of internationally trained healthcare professionals. In 2013, it was 27%. Now it's all the way up to 35%. And we're actually anticipating a call with Cara O'Keefe, one of the province's pharmacists, this morning, after there was I believe it was a national summit, and some of the recommendations they're putting forward. But that's really fascinating numbers. The numbers of people trained internationally and their percentage of total supply here in the country. Okay. This one I have no idea what to make of. And apparently the 2-week shutdown back in April at Cornerbrook Pulp and Paper, and we talked about there was some sort of concern with the boilers. The fact of the matter is the paper mill itself was a complete failure to maintain its boiler pressure safety system. And of course, that could have resulted in catastrophic disaster, whether it be fires or the leak of some chemicals and or potentially explosions. So there were 78 devices had not been serviced in over 30 years. as opposed to the 1 or 2 years, every 1 or 2 years to have these things inspected. So, I mean, how can that go on? It seems remarkable to me this day and age, with the attention to workplace safety and the cost to the companies when and if something goes wrong on site. But for 30 years or over 30 years, 78 of these devices had not been serviced. So there's one fellow who apparently is an expert in the field. His name is Desmond Sadana from the Canadian Boiler Association. He says if the safety valves that are mounted on pressurized equipment or piping systems open when the system's pressure exceeds a certain threshold, they're essential for avoiding boiler problems and dangerous situations, preventing pressure increases that could cause malfunctions, fire hazards, product damage, or even explosions. So, obviously, industry concerns regarding pulp and paper, but when you talk about safety, that is I don't know if you can call it an oversight, that's probably not stern enough a word. And on that front, remember, this is also something that needs to be addressed by the House of Assembly, by the government, tout suite, is what we found out regarding problems with workplace accident investigations. It was really something. For starters, I have no earthly idea why there's simply a 2-year deadline for occupational health and safety to conclude an investigation and possibly bring forward charges. But over a quarter of the workplace accidents, they just run out of time, or the clock runs out. And so you know full well inside that number, there have to be some companies that the management or owners were, thinking a big sigh of relief here. We know something went wrong. It was probably our fault, but yet the clock ran out. So whether it be the number of investigators, the level of training afforded to them, and there's even some examples where at the 11th hour, charges were brought forward, but one case in particular, there was 3 charges, but 0 evidence presented in 2. Why? Because the investigation was incomplete. So while we talk about the potential for a real problem at Cornerbrook Pulp and Paper, and you know the stories about other workplace accidents, and some of them had tragic results, we've got a problem with how we investigate and the training for investigators and the number of investigators and the timeline to complete an investigation and potentially bring forward a charge. So those two inherently linked. Of course, that all came from an internal audit. So these are people on the outside looking in. This is internal work being done. Okay. I had a call yesterday from a lady who's a member of Action Now, and this is talking about intimate partner violence, and there has been a real spike in that particular issue in this province and around the country. It's a huge problem. So the one of the recommendations they've made to the Minister, that's Minister of Justice John Hogan, is to introduce ankle bracelet monitoring. Now, apparently, the Minister says that they're close to indeed bringing this forward. It requires amendments to the Correctional Services Act, but that's been done. They drafted that legislation back in 2011, but it's never been brought into force. It received royal assent in May. So, absolutely, we know what's happening. It works in other jurisdictions. It was actually brought forward years ago where we used the ankle monitoring, but the Tories cut that particular program some years back for a cost-saving measure, but this seems to me like a pretty important thing. 2019, the then Minister of Justice, Andrew Parsons, brought it back, but then it was only applied to people who had already been convicted of offences, as opposed to what they're suggesting now. You're charged with an act regarding intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and I would suggest that it should also include violence against children, is that we're going to put an ankle bracelet on you to know where you are at all times. Hopefully that will act as a further deterrent, because we know what happens when some of these alleged perpetrators are released. If they're hell-bent for leather to harm, hurt, or kill their intimate partner, they're going to do it. Protection orders on a piece of paper, by and large, doesn't get paid much heed by those who are accused of these vicious offences. So if that committee, any member of, or anyone in the general public would like to talk about that issue, as traumatic and as difficult as it is, we can do it. Okay. No real update to offer regarding the status of the fire surrounding Churchill Falls. Apparently they've been held, and so I guess that's good. It hasn't jumped the river, and they're doing some clearing to act as a fire break, which is going to take some days. There are some concerns that the fact the temperature is going to be around 26 degrees. There's going to be some wind involved, and hopefully shifts from the west, which is the dangerous one there. So fingers crossed that the crews who are doing fantastic work to hold these fires at bay, of which there are 9 burning in Labrador at this moment in time, 1 burning on the island, but no real understandable or understood timeline as to when the residents of Churchill Falls are going to be able to return to their homes. So, and once again, bravo to everyone in Happy Valley Goose Bay who's doing all they can to welcome the evacuees with open arms, to do what they can to make them comfortable. A couple of quick ones before we get to you. So the Minister of Environment, Bernie Davis, is in Madrid, Spain for a green hydrogen-related conference. I guess just another example of the province being very bullish on that particular industry. And yesterday I said, and I probably shouldn't have, is that the appeals have been rejected. But of course the timeline hasn't completely run out yet. They've got to like the 8th or the 9th of July to respond to whatever number of appeals have been put forward. I think most of those are probably about World Energy GH2. So the minister responsible in Spain and also going to be touring the National Centre for Hydrogen. So that's just in an effort to open the door for those types of discussions, if you're so inclined. Okay, this a couple on the federal front. So Nikki Ashton, NDP Member of Parliament, she's very rarely at Parliament. You know, she's been woefully absent since the beginning of the pandemic. Then the concerns were, sharing some selfies on social media with trips she had taken with her family, to visit quote-unquote stakeholders, charging the government some $17,000 plus. She's paid back some in the neighbourhood of $2,600. But that whole concept of the loopholes available for members of Parliament to bring, whether it be their partners or their families with them, and travel that is absolutely not for their families. You don't need a support person. If you're going to be an elected member of Parliament and you want to have your family travel with you, have them travel on their own dime, not mine. And this one here, I think is going to be obviously probably the biggest story in the country regarding politics today. Man, oh man. So for 31 years, the Liberals had held the federal riding of Toronto St. Paul's. Yesterday in the by-election, the Conservative candidate Don Stewart beat the Liberal candidate Leslie Church. This is a huge swing. I mean, we know the polling numbers are what they are, and whether or not this was about the issues for cost of living and home prices and immigration levels, it really does feel, and when you hear people being interviewed as streeters in the riding of Toronto St. Paul's, pointing at Trudeau fatigue. And I don't think that's a stretch to say that this was absolutely a vote on the Prime Minister. So, for context, not only held it for 31 years, but back in 2021, the Liberal candidate, who's now the outgoing candidate, Carolyn Bennett, beat her opponent by 24 points, and now, of course, the Liberals lost by 2 points. People will spin this however they see fit, but this is a massive problem, yet another problem for the federal Liberals, and a big breakthrough for the Conservatives. Even when the Liberals had a hard time back there a number of years ago returning members to Parliament, of that season they won 34 seats, they held this one, and now it has gone to the Tories. And you'll hear a lot of commentary from all sides about this, but this does present an absolutely yet another soul-searching opportunity for the federal Liberals, and specifically for the Prime Minister. Without question, even when you hear current Liberal members of Parliament voice their ongoing support for the Prime Minister, well, if this one was a Trudeau fatigue vote, and it really feels like it was, I would imagine calls for leadership review or for possibly the Prime Minister to simply step down will be growing. No doubt about it. Those Liberals out there who are intending to run again or to join the Liberal fold as a potential nominee, boy, this result gives, I would imagine, plenty of them reason for pause and for thought and reflection, and yes, a little bit of soul searching. That's a big story, and that will be talked about by the Conservatives loudly and proudly, and understandably so. So is it time for the Prime Minister to put party over himself, whether that be party over ego, and or however you would like to couch it or phrase it? But it looks like the writing's on the wall. It has been for some time, but now I think they've amped up the amount of Sharpie being used and the colours being used. So you want to talk about that, we can do it. And just a very interesting quick political note, this date in history. It was today in 1993 that Kim Campbell was chosen to lead the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada. She became the first and only female Prime Minister of the country. She was the first baby boomer to hold that office, and the only Prime Minister born in British Columbia. That was in 1993. Oh, and on Trudeau. So if he runs again, he's hoping to be in office for in excess of 10 years. There hasn't been a Prime Minister hold the seat as Prime Minister for more than a decade since Wilfrid Laurier. And he first began his 15-year reign in 1896. So every politician and every political party has a best before date. And I don't think it's unkind or unfair to suggest that the country quite clearly, just look at every single poll from every single polling company, that the best before date for the Prime Minister has come and gone. And what that means for his party's hopes in the future, if the polls reflected today went down to talk about how many seats they're going to hold the next time around, it's not pretty. So if you're a member of Parliament representing the Liberals, are you willing to speak out? Ken MacDonald did, but then sort of backtracked on his call for a leadership review. But I would imagine Mr. MacDonald is going to be joined by several members of his caucus. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@VOCM.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. That means you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's begin this morning on line number 3. Good morning, Jackie. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
I'm just calling to let the people of the St. John's area know that I'm bringing in my Remembrance Art Show to the Royal Canadian Legion. Branch 1 has invited me to bring it out and show it. And Arts NL has graciously given me a travel grant to help bring it in. And it's about 23 different pieces. And there's about between, I say, 20,000 handmade forget-me-nots and poppies, but it's actually around 31,000 or 39,000 because all the poppies in that have centers and they're smaller poppies.
There's a lot to commemorate. I was almost going to say celebrate, but there's a lot to commemorate this go around. So have you taken this a particular exhibit or art show on tour in the past?
No, I've tried several times to bring it into St. John's, but I have brought it to Corner Brook, Stephenville, and Grand Falls. And then it was sort of like I started off with the Royal Regiment blanket, which has over 7,000 forget-me-nots on it, and that started the Remembrance Project, as I call it, because we went to France, myself and my husband, and his cousin Gus was killed in World War I, and I think that's where the seed started, because that was around 2014, and I said, I'd like to do something for the 100th anniversary, and I contacted the armories here, and Captain Wheeler graciously got me 3 army blankets because I wanted, my original idea was to have the army blankets and just have like a field of forget-me-nots. But then Captain Wheeler changed everything because he asked me if I could do the regiment blanket in a timeline. So then I had to have a lot of information and I had to do a lot of research. And I started off with the first 500 and then did every battle in sequence on the blanket.
Are you the only person who has contributed to the effort here? I know that the captain supplied you with the blankets, but has anyone else contributed to this art show?
For the 23 pieces that I have done, the only one that has contributed to it was the Rug Hooking Guild of Newfoundland and Labrador, because I am a member and I took some of the pieces to one of the camps and showed it to them. And the ladies at the camp gave me $200 towards the next piece, which was the Royal Navy, which I did as a rug, seeing as the Rug Hooking Guild supplied the money, so I bought all the supplies for that piece from that. But most everything else was supplied through the sale of my own artwork.
Jackie, how long is it going to be on display at Branch 1, which is, of course, Branch 1 is on Blackmarsh Road here in the city?
Branch 1, it's going to be on for July the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, but most of it will be up on the 2nd and 3rd because I only have limited space on July the 1st.
Okay, makes sense.
So, and there's pieces like the blanket for the regiment, there's the Royal Navy done, there's the forestry is done, the ladies that served is done, there's also pieces for the peacekeepers, there's a blanket for the Korean War, and I'm bringing my dad's shadow box. I had his medals mounted there last year. I made a trip in and got them all done. So, because both my dad and mom are veterans of World War II. And I guess that's sort of the seed for the respect for the military that was installed in us when we were growing up. And last year at the memorial service here, I was standing at the epitaph and just having a look around and realized that I had stood there with my grandfather, my father. I was now standing there with my children and grandchildren. So 5 generations had stood at that epitaph.
Amazing. Jackie, thanks for doing this, and I'm sure people will enjoy the art show or the exhibit at Branch 1 on Black Marsh Road, the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 1. So it opens up on the 1st, but of course when you get some more extended space, because the Legion will be a busy spot on Memorial Day, a bit more of the presentation available on the 2nd and 3rd. Thanks for making time for the show.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take good care.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Yeah, so we've got an update coming about what we know about what's happening in Labrador. I mean, there's 9 fires. Of course, the keen focus has been on the fire that is, quote-unquote, threatening Churchill Falls and what that might mean. The one question that I put forward yesterday got a little bit of negative pushback, but if we know how vulnerable Churchill Falls is and the hydroelectric generating station, and they're now working towards a fire break, some deforestation to try to take away all the material for the fire to burn, and so that's ongoing. It's going to take a few days for that to actually be completed, but you would think things like that, and I would include things like getting out in front of issues in the first place, similar to all the culvert replacement work that's been done. Sometimes I think we can identify, based on some of the mapping that's done for flood risk, if we have identified spots in the province where the culverts are undersized, given what we've seen for the severity of some of these storms, maybe getting out in front and replacing them with larger culverts before it's an after the fact, which is more costly and more damage will be, more of the devastation will be brought to bear because the culverts weren't able to handle the amount of water. So, Dave, you want me to take this one quick before I go to the news? It looks like a pretty fundamental issue. Does he want to come out or no? All right, let's check Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back from the break, an update from what's taking place in Labrador. Okay, I'll do that. Line number 2. JJ, you're on the air.
Hi, I just wanted to make one brief comment. I think banking hours have gotten ridiculous. Worse and worse. Every time you go to the bank now, it's like new banking hours, new teller hours. For people who don't have access to computers, it's absolutely ridiculous. Just wanted to make that comment. Totally upset about this morning.
So what banking hours have been reduced? You don't have to name whatever bank that you use.
Well, it's just, for example, like you go to the bank, it's supposed to be open for 9:30. That's for advice hours. Teller service opens at 10 o'clock. They're open for teller service from 10 till 2. People in the bank are working there till 5 o'clock. Why? It's just so frustrating.
Yeah, the bank that I use, I believe the teller service begins at 9:30, runs all the way till 5 o'clock, and of course open on Saturdays too. I don't know, I can't be 100% confident in that because I generally don't go to the bank until the afternoon anyway, but the tellers seem to be there. But you're right, I mean, every company is moving to, you need to have a computer to navigate business operations with notably the banks.
And especially when you have a senior or an aging parent that you're helping to do their banking needs with, and they need to be carried to the bank to do these things. It's like you're going on 10 years ago when you could go to the bank at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they were open till 5 o'clock in the day. And it's just most frustrating. I'm so upset here this morning to have to make 2 trips to the bank to get to speak with somebody, just so you can actually speak with somebody at the teller. And they're there, they're looking at you, and they're flashing 10 fingers at you. We're not open yet. Anyway.
I understand.
That's all I wanted to say. I was just like, I came out of the bank just a moment ago, and it was just like, you got to be kidding me. To have access to your own money, seriously. Right. Have a good day, Patty.
You too. Thanks for the call, JJ. I can hear the frustration. Point taken.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. I guess that's akin to you go to the mall, and it's 3 minutes to 10. the staff are right there looking at you. The screen or the gate continues to be hauled across. Now, maybe they're just following management orders, but if I'm in a bank and I'm standing there, and I know my job in 4 minutes from now is to do business with you as a customer, I'm sure it's frustrating for the tellers as well, because they're gawking at you, you're gawking back at them, and nobody knows what to do, and you're just looking at the clock, counting down the minutes before you actually get to do your business. All right, let's take a break. When we do come back, the NDP member for Lab West is Jordan Brown. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1 and say good morning to the NDP member for Lab West. That's Jordan Brown. Jordan, you're on the air.
Thanks for having me, Paddy.
No problem at all. What can you tell us of what's happening in Labrador today regarding the fires?
Well, right now there's 9 fires burning in the total of Labrador. The one at Menahek Dam recently been declared as under control, which is a good thing, because that was one that was right on a point that was about 4 kilometers away from a hydro facility there. Right now, we have the 2 jets burning in Churchill Falls that have been, significantly moved closer. Same thing. It's about 4 or 5 kilometers away from the community there, and they're currently constructing a fire break, and they're also releasing some water from the reservoir down the river. From what I was understand, as another way to get that area wet and to hopefully keep that from jumping the river there. And we also have a large fire that's been burning for 2 weeks, 40 kilometers south of Lab West, technically in Quebec. So for the most part, Labrador West, in Churchill Falls, Labrador West is completely surrounded by fires.
And we know that Quebec had loaned or put on loan a couple of water bombers and the pilots, and of course they've been recalled. Do you happen to know as to whether or not the 2 water bombers from Saskatchewan have arrived?
From my understanding, I believe that they're either en route or have arrived. I haven't seen anything as if they arrived or not yet, but mostly from my understanding is the ones from Ontario are still there. The ones obviously recalled back to Quebec is there's some massive fires burning down around the railway down in Sept-Îles, Quebec. So, this whole region of Canada right now, the Labrador Peninsula as a whole is I'm just looking at a fire map right now, is just surrounded by forest fires. Labrador right now is going to be blanketed in smoke all day today from fires in Quebec and within Labrador itself. Yeah, and
the fire close by Churchill Falls, the problematic one. So you say 5 or 6 kilometers, which means it has advanced somewhat. They were saying that, there's been no advancement and there's a lot of smoke and just burning up the fuel that had yet to be burnt. And the temperature today forecasted to be 26 degrees, winds from the southwest, which is a problematic direction. So let's hope that the crews, who are obviously doing solid work, are able to keep that fire at bay this morning. And then it's the issue regarding the evacuees. And it's easy enough to say, well, people at Churchill Falls have been evacuated. And there were some 750, or I can't remember the exact number of residents and people working at the hydroelectric station. But it's the receiving end in Happy Valley Goose Bay. I mean, just imagine having to receive an entire town of evacuees. And, it's not like there's a whole lot of resources available necessarily to see your community grow by those hundreds of people. So any thoughts about what's happening in Happy Valley Goose Bay?
Well, it was like I said, they were given 45 minutes notice. They had to move. They wanted to get them out of the area before nightfall. At that time, there was a thunderstorm rolling through Happy Valley Goose Bay. So they had to stand out in that and try to register people and get people ready. They had to get their sports facility ready to take all these people. It's a daunting task, and this is what emergency plans are made for. Interesting enough, I did speak to someone from CFLCO there the other day, and they told me that only a few days earlier that they hauled out their emergency forest fire response plan out and did a tabletop exercise with it just days before this happened. I guess once the fire up at Menahek Dam ignited, so they were kind of preparing themselves as well. Labrador is a very forested area, especially in Labrador West, and through the central region of Labrador. It's very forested, and we've had massive fires here. Some people don't even realize how large the forest fires have passed through Labrador, but they were just in areas that were uninhabited. So we're every year we have big fires here, but not very often, they do come closer down. But in the last couple of years, they've been creeping closer and closer to communities. Just look at in 2011, 2012, the forest fire season there, a massive part of Lab West. We had to evacuate Wabush. We had many most of the cottage country in Labrador West got burned up. We had to receive the entire community of Wabush had to go over to Lab City. This is not new, but at the same time, these fires here now, like I said, 9 fires, and all of them within, fairly close to, like, in the Labrador region, close to inhabited areas or large important pieces of infrastructure. Last year we saw the railway in Labrador West constantly threatened with forest fires. One of our accesses out through Quebec was closed for days on end because of forest fires. Even earlier, at the beginning of this year, the 389 was closed due to forest fires. This is becoming a more concern every year as infrastructure is constantly threatened by these fires.
And then it's just the entire concept of how prepared we are. The province for years has said, well, we used to have 5 water bombers. Now we have staffed up. Apparently some of those issues have been alleviated. But we had 5 water bombers. One was damaged in 2018. Just all the going back and forth. And, of course, the amount to pay for insurance was going to be some $10 million in the deductible. They said no to that. Now consider repair. Do you have any understanding of exactly what the plan will be? Because if we needed 5 at one point, we probably need 5 today.
Well, that's the thing. The plan is, still kind of willy-nilly. They're saying, well, we'll fix it. But, we had a water bomber base here in Labrador West. We've had one here since from the late 70s into the 80s. I've had conversations with some of the former staff of that water bomber base who still live in this community and talk about, we used to have all this here. We had all this equipment. We had this. Right now, there is nothing in Labrador West when it comes to forest fire preparedness. There's nothing. We call Goose Bay, and hopefully the weather's okay for the equipment to come over from Goose Bay. We have nothing here. They tore down the building that used to be here for the water bomber base. They removed the water bomber out of here. And there was actually a time they had 2 water bombers in Goose Bay and said, okay, we'll station 2 in Goose Bay. One's, this should be able to cover off Lab West and Lab Central. Then they took that water bomber and moved it to Deer Lake. So there was only 1 water bomber in Labrador. When all these fires broke out there a few weeks ago, there was only 1 water bomber in the entirety of Labrador. And now they're telling us, we're going to fix the 5th water bomber. But are you going to bring the water bomber base back to Lab West? Because right now, I'm looking at a screen here, there's a fire 40 kilometers south of Lab West. There's a fire 90 kilometers north of Lab West. There's 2 fires within, earshot of Churchill Falls. There's a fire on Lake Joseph. Right we're completely surrounded by forest fires here in Lab West right now, and there is no water bomber base. There's no front operating service here in Labrador West for any forest fire service anymore in Labrador West.
Yeah. And just for context, sometimes we lose sight of just how enormous Labrador is in terms of square kilometres. And I don't think I could be precise here, but there's somewhere like 294 or 295,000 square kilometres is the size of Labrador. For context, the entirety of the United Kingdom is about 225,000 square kilometres. The whole UK could fit in Labrador with the area left over.
Well, that's exactly. So just I guess more closer terms, you can fit the island of Newfoundland, the island of PEI, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia into Labrador. Labrador itself is larger than the rest of Atlantic Canada. So you just stop and think about it. We have massive things. And think about it. Most of that area is forested. Like that, the majority of that area is forested. Yes, I understand. There's only 52 inhabited areas of Labrador, of communities. But at the same time, there's some very important infrastructure here. Think about it, Churchill Falls. And then not only just Churchill Falls, the massive transmission lines that go from Churchill Falls to Lab West, and Churchill Falls to Goose Bay, and Churchill Falls to Quebec. Those areas have to be protected. We have a railway. We have one of the most rural and remote railways in the entire country, a feat of engineering in itself. That has to be protected. We have, the iron mines. We have the highways. We have, the communities. All this has to be protected at some sort. But you know what? The closest water bomber, if any fire breaks out, is 2-hour flight from Goose Bay because they took away the services in the heartland of Labrador. They took it away.
Yeah. Jordan, I appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for the call.
No worries. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. So, it really is something when you think about it. Now, if you've ever been to the United Kingdom, of course, the countries really are quite small when you think about being a Canadian and the geographical footprint of Canada and the size of this province. I think the island of Newfoundland is something like the 14th largest island in the world. And Labrador, just think about it, you could plop the entirety of the United Kingdom in Labrador and still have plenty of area left over. It's really remarkable when you do give it some consideration. All right, let's see what's happening on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. Right, favors when you join us live in the queue. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to St. John's City Councillor at Large. That's Sandy Hickman. He's in charge of the Transportation Committee and the Canada Games lead. Good morning, Sandy. You're on the air.
How are you this morning, Paddy?
Not too bad. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Good. Good, sir. Monday morning. It's a good indoor day by the looks of it. Tuesday morning, sorry. And you wanted talk about the paid parking management strategy.
Yeah, I know there's proposed changes, and I know parking is significant revenue for the city, so what's on the table?
No question. Well, we approved a plan back in 2018, which had 57 recommendations, and these had to do with variable paid parking rates, aligning permits with demand, and converting time parking to paid parking. As everyone's aware, of course, the implementation of pay stations and pay by phone application, that's been moving along nicely now. People are starting to understand it and use it well. I think people, once they get comfortable with pay by phone, they found it very good, very effective, because it gives them a chance for flexibility in case they need more time on their parking. So we approved 4 of the recommendations from that strategy, and 3 of them had to do with converting long stay parking to implementing a long stay parking rate as opposed to having time of year. Now, this came out of during the pandemic, parking wasn't as important, it wasn't as needed in certain areas, but now it's picking up again, and we want to adjust as well. But as well, we have found that since 2017, that COVID downtown demands have probably lessened a little, so we're actually lowering some of the fees on some of the downtown parking areas, such as City Hall Garage Level 5 from 175 to 100. And we're going to leave them there for a while, see how they work, see if the places get busier, and hope that people will take more advantage of using them. But the other 3 are on Lamarche Road and Ricketts Road by St. Clair's to allow people some flexibility with their parking. They can actually stay longer at a higher rate if they find that their time is needed. And the same on Harvey Road. If they find that they need a little more time, they would just pay a little bit extra per hour. So these are things that were well researched and adjusted to the changing times, and hopefully they will be helpful for people when they're looking for a parking, of whether it's just 2 hours or whether it turns out to be longer. We hope that it will help them find some parking.
So you talk about a reduction in level 5 at City Hall, but overall across the board, what's the percentage average increase in parking fees?
Well, as I said, these are commercial parking permits, by the way, I'm talking about, and so they've gone down a little bit in different areas to help try and stimulate use of those particular parking areas. But when it comes to roadside parking, as you know, meters have been moved out, and we're doing the area parking where you would go to the kiosk and pay, or you would pay on your phone. It's very simple procedure once you understand how to use it, and people are really getting the hang of it, as I said. So the rates have gone up not too much. There's $1.75 per hour for the first 4 hours and $3.50 per hour for subsequent hours. So, a shorter parking time, it's not too expensive, and if you need longer time, and again, it's to encourage turnover, Patty. I mean, this is what's important for some of the shopping areas as well. We want turnover, so that the people don't sit and park there all day, and don't make it easy for people to park and pop in and shop or go for a meal. So these kinds of thinking was really evolved. I must say, I'm very impressed with the staff and the parking and transportation divisions. Their thinking has evolved over the last 2 or 3 years into understanding the needs and understanding the importance of moving and turnover.
Given historical numbers, how much revenue is left on the table with the introduction of the pedestrian mall?
That's hard to measure because people will park elsewhere, but surely others will take buses and others will walk down. Yeah, so it's hard to measure exactly how much their loss is, but the fees that the proprietors pay for the stalls, for the tables, etc., that is definitely designed to replace the lost revenue in parking.
Do we think it replaces it in full?
Pretty well, yeah. Not 100% in full, no, but it replaces a fair bit of it. That's the only concept that we're using here. When we're taking up parking stalls, then we're asking the restaurant owner or other business owner to recover most of that cost for us.
There was a report brought forward that said that the price for having one of these stalls downtown was even more expensive than Toronto. The numbers I think they were throwing around was $2,700 compared to $600 in the city of Toronto. The city said they were unable to even come up with, how those numbers were arrived at. Have you done any further work there to see what kind of comparison we have in place, whether it be with similarly sized cities like Halifax, even though we're smaller than Halifax? Have we done any additional work on that?
Well, what we've done a lot of work in figuring out what fee we would charge. We didn't look at other cities per se as being the reason for setting our price. Sure, there are different prices around the country. Some of these places are on large sidewalks where they're not replacing parking, so there's no revenue loss to the city, and that's an important factor that probably didn't come out in the study. In our case, they're almost all exclusively taking up valuable parking space downtown. So therefore, and it of course lost revenue for the city. So we've asked the providers to pay, as I said, a fairly substantial percentage of that, not 100%, but a good percentage of the lost revenue to the city. So that's how our fees were set. And then there's a charge for a 3-year per permit of $150 or $200, I believe. It's another fee, administration fee. But basically, it's for lost revenue from parking the parking spaces. How they do it in other cities, you'd have to ask them directly what their formula is. The formula would be different for every city.
Let's move off to Canada Games, because there was a pretty distinct rumble or rumour that was spreaded around about the fact that the possibility for the Aqua Arena, for the work to be done, upgrades to meet national standards, was not going to happen. Now, we've heard in the recent past the co-chairs have said that we are on track. Can you give us a bit of inside baseball here? Because before Gary and Kim spoke out, it was pretty clear that people thought that the Aqua Arena would not hit the schedule.
Let me say this about that and that. I really believe that we will be there. My goal, as I guess a sport guy too, is to get our team in the pool training as long as possible before the games. And I think that will happen, whether it's 3 months or whether it's 6 months with limited public access. I don't know. That would be a hope for me. But there is major work. The roof was the real tough part of it all. There's a bunch of things had to be done. So the scaffolding, etc., has been moving along. The network's been moving along nicely. The scaffolding is starting to come out. And the extension seems to be moving nicely as well. I'm very hopeful that it'll be finished not well in advance of the games, but certainly comfortably in advance of the games. The latest updates are that things are moving along a little better than they may have been a few months ago. And this, a lot of it had to do with the personnel availability for the contractors, of course. And it seems to have settled in and moving very nicely now. So I have confidence that it will be done. And we don't necessarily need every single part of the building open in order to run the Canada Games. We just need the actual pool deck, and of course some of the service rooms as well. Now the diving tower is what that needs a little bit of extensions, of work on extensions. Its standards are different than they were when the first diving platform was put there, and that can be done fairly easily. But we can make it work. I don't think that's going to be a problem. The water will be in the pool. The spectators will be there, and the teams will have space to work together around the pool and for warm-ups, etc., and to cheer on their teammates. And I really, really think that we're going to be there.
Because the key on the sporting side, to be the host, is one thing you talk about economic activity, if you're a member of council, but for the athletes, it's familiarity with your surroundings, getting a chance to get that leg up on your competition by being in that pool, being on that track, being on that pitch.
Absolutely.
So
you're 100% right, Paddy, 100%.
For the other facilities that needed some work, upgrades and or new facilities to be built, anything we need to know on hitting schedule?
Again, everything is very much on schedule, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see the bubble back on Greenbelt over the winter, and we're going to play tennis indoors in Greenbelt. And I think we kind of took advantage of this opportunity to get some funds to replace that bubble down there, extend the number of courts by one, I believe, and just create a better facility overall there. And they've allowed us to play tennis indoors, so we can utilize that. The track complex with the soccer field, I mean, this is an amazing facility. I was amazed that we were able to have two facilities there instead of just having a soccer field inside of a track. This is a real bonus for both sports and for the university. And it's on schedule. The paving is going on now of the track. And then the surface, the sort of rubberized polyurethane surface will be going on by early August. It's ahead of the schedule I expect, to tell you the truth. And I'm hoping once lines are down and inspections are done that we can get athletes trained on that during late fall kind of a thing, certainly for next spring. And that will be a great advantage for our kids, no question about it, Patty. The soccer field is there. It's going to be one of 3 soccer fields used, and that surface is going down this summer as well. So I don't anticipate any problems. The building is something that's more of a training building. There are certain areas of it, like the change rooms and that will definitely be ready. And if a couple of things aren't quite finished in that, then that doesn't impact the games whatsoever.
And you mentioned the Greenbelt bubble. It's a fascinating story, given the fact that, it's lasted for decades. And for other places, we got about double or triple the lifespan out of that bubble. Why? Because the most serious damage it suffers is because of UV light. And given the lack of sun here, the bubble was able to last longer than it did anywhere else. Funny story.
Your technical knowledge, your knowledge astounds me sometimes, Fatty. Good for you.
Well, I just remember reading it, because even the folks and the members at Greenbelt, they were year after year thinking, is this the year? Is this the year? Is this the year? And apparently for decades after, we're saying, okay, well, it's still working order, so off we go. I appreciate the time this morning, Councillor. Anything else?
No, always good to talk to you, sir.
My pleasure. Stay in touch.
Take care.
There you go. Sandy Hickman, at-large councillor and the Canada Games lead and the chair of the Transportation Committee. So, yeah, I've had a couple of people voice some, I don't know if they're minor concerns, but concerns regarding some of the accessibility issues downtown, because when the pedestrian wall was first introduced there a couple of years ago, was this year number 3, Dave? I can't remember. Anyway, whatever it was. In the first year, of course, there's a learning curve. There's some wrinkles that have to be ironed out, and some of those were associated with accessibility. I know that the business owners downtown, understanding that somewhere in the neighborhood of possibly 20% of their customers would have some mobility concerns, that of course addressing those to be as welcoming and as accommodating as possible would be in their best interest on the revenue side and on the profit side. Not to speak beyond, the societal responsibility that we have to make sure the patios and the decks and businesses in general are accessible. Let's check in on social media before we get to the news. You know who we are. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Today's a good day to get on the program. No topic too big, too small. A couple of emails referencing the fact that the Minister of Environment, Bernard Davis, is in Madrid, Spain, talking about green hydrogen. Yet, I think another example of exactly where the provincial government is and the federal government is on this particular industry, which is in its infancy. And we can tackle that or anything else under the sun right after this news break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. As via email, a question about why we didn't mention X, Y, and Z. This one is about the meeting of the Council of Atlantic Premiers. They were set to meet beginning today out in Steadybrook, but apparently some scheduling related matters. Now it's going to be a virtual meeting. Why I didn't give it much in the way of attention this morning is because it's pretty vague as to what they're even talking about, what's on the agenda, and until we get some actual feedback as to what's going on, then it's going to be hard to even deduce whether or not this is a productive meeting and or whatever issues and collaboration amongst the Atlantic Canadian provinces will be. Anyway, let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 1 and say good morning to the Senior Director of Market Development at Turo Canada, which of course is the rental car sharing. Talk about summer travel. That's Basim El Rahimi. Hopefully I got that right. Basim, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing today?
Doing okay. Thanks for asking. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you on the program. So you conducted a survey to what end?
Yeah, so, Turo, as you mentioned, is a leading car-sharing platform in Canada, and what we do is we connect local car owners with a large community of travelers looking for the perfect vehicle for the next adventure. And as you can imagine, summer travel is really important for us. So what we did is we surveyed Canadians to better understand their summer travel plans this year, and we learned some fascinating stats. First, we learned that Canadians are prioritizing road trips over flying for their summer travel, and that's particularly true for distances that are, 5 hours away or less. And when we look at, the Atlantic provinces in particular, we've learned that 7 out of 10 Canadians would prefer to drive over flying. So we thought that was fascinating, and excited to kind of discuss that in greater detail with you.
Sure. And inside that number, a few things. When we talk about 5 hours away, I would think that that's probably been the norm historically for that percentage of Canadians to be willing to travel via their own car or on the roads. And then, of course, how do you factor in what is becoming cost prohibitive nature of traveling via air? Because the need for the industry to bounce back regarding losses during the pandemic is very real, and the ticket prices reflect it. So how do you factor that into the numbers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if we take a step back and think about what our people are looking for, people desire flexible and affordable travel experiences, as you alluded to it. And things like making multiple stops or even spontaneous stops along the way is really easy in a road trip. And people are increasingly valuing that flexibility. And then when you add to that it is a lot cheaper than air travel, it's not really surprising to see more and more people turn towards, road trip for their summer travels.
Yeah, and the concept of staycation has also taken root, which I think probably impacts those numbers as well. When you look at the Atlantic Canadian numbers, how does it compare with the rest of the country?
Yeah, so, what we're seeing is almost 72% of folks in the Atlantic provinces would prefer a road trip over flying. And really it's driven by, again, that greater control over the itinerary. Pricing kind of comes into play. And so this is really kind of what we're hearing from the Atlantic provinces is really that desire to have more control at a more affordable price when it comes to their summer travel. And that's kind of the highest proportion of all provinces, 7 out of 10 Canadians.
Did you break it down based on age demographics? Because there is a concept out there for self or immediate gratification as opposed to have more time available for travel. Say, for instance, if I'm a retiree, I don't have those time constraints, necessarily like me, who has to book a couple of weeks off from work. So any age demographic breakdowns?
Yeah, we specifically looked at Gen Z, and we found two very interesting stats. First is that, Gen Z Canadians are the age group that is most hesitant about air travel. 1 in 2 of them are concerned about safety concerns about air travel, and that's really impacting them, their kind of mode of transportation. So, that was the first insight around perception of safety. And then the second one is about affordability. We see, and we've learned that, 3/4 of Gen Z Canadians have less money this year to spend on travel than they did last year. But that doesn't mean they're not prioritizing it. Even though they might be spending a little bit less than they did last year, almost half of them will spend more than a monthly paycheck on a summer vacation this year. So they really are prioritizing those experiences.
Yeah, and sometimes this is not about this particular survey, but I think some people do generally get confused with what age group is whatever, millennials or Gen Z. So the Gen Z would be somewhere between 12 years of age and 28 or so, right?
Exactly. We're looking at 18 to 27-year-olds.
Okay, and then the millennials, of course, would be somewhere between 30 and mid-40s. Gen X be somewhere between the mid-40s and the late 50s. So just for reference to folks like me who get confused about these different generations. Let's talk about Turo's impact in the market here. We know, we've heard from some tourism offerings that they've lost bookings. Why? Because the absence of rental cars. And it's easy to blame governments or what have you, but even the Rental Car Association of Canada has said it's not about what governments do or do not do. It's about the priority by the manufacturers. They're prioritizing the retail outlets versus their rental outlets. So consequently, in the bounce back, where most of the rental fleets, they sold off virtually everything they had because no one was traveling, it just stands to reason. So inside of that envelope, how has Turo penetrated this market? What did last summer look like? What does this summer look like?
Of course. We know how important the travel season and the summer season is for the Atlantic provinces. A big portion of the tourism activity happens in that season, as you know. And what we've been doing at Turo is really making sure that there is vehicles available to satisfy that demand. And not just any vehicle. We want to provide a wide range of vehicles, everything from a family-friendly SUV to sleek convertibles, to make sure that when folks are looking for vehicles in the Atlantic provinces, they can find that perfect vehicle for their specific needs. On the flip side, it creates an incredible economic opportunity for car owners in the Atlantic to monetize those vehicles at a very high rate during the summer, and they're really able to kind of save that tourism season by making sure that visitors from the province or outside of the province have that perfect vehicle to get to wherever they're looking to go.
I think there was a story last summer here in the province where someone saw it as an actual legitimate business opportunity. They had 5 vehicles, I believe, in their Turo fleet just in that one family. So that's an interesting employ. Do we have any idea exactly how many people put their private car forward for Turo last year in this province?
So I don't have the stats specifically for the Atlantic provinces, but I could tell you that we have tens of thousands of vehicles active on the platform across the country, and you've really kind of nailed on the head. People usually start with 1 or 2 cars, and they see the economic opportunity for entrepreneurship and start to build businesses around the Turo platform, where they get to 5, 10 plus vehicles and are really able to build sustainable businesses on Turo's platform.
People have some questions remaining and some possible concerns regarding car insurance. We know our premiums are going upward, an actuarial pool that's shared across Atlantic Canada. My abstract is clean, but my premiums went up. How does insurance work with Turo?
Of course. Insurance is paramount to our offering, and we provide insurance with every reservation for both tour hosts and our guests. So our insurance offering is very, very solid. We have over $2 million in liability coverage, and we protect the vehicle in terms of physical damages. So you could really rest easy knowing that when you share your car on the platform, you're covered and you're not carrying any risk. This does not result in any premium increases on your policy because of car sharing. So while premiums overall are going up because of, increasing car thefts and whatnot, that is independent of Turo. But because from sharing your vehicle on Turo, you should expect no premium increase from your insurance provider.
I appreciate your time. Anything else you'd like to offer this morning?
No, I just wanted to let folks that if you haven't had a chance to experience Turo yet, I would encourage you to download the app or go to our website, turo.com, and explore the incredible kind of selection of vehicles that we have. And I just want to thank you so much for having me this morning.
Happy to have you on. Can you give me the correct pronunciation of your name before we say goodbye?
Bassem El Rahimi.
Nice to have you on the show, Bassem. Thanks for making time.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Bassem is the Senior Director of Marketing at Turo Canada. Before we get to the break, let's go to line number 3. Good morning, James. You're on the air.
Hey, Patty. How are you this morning?
Great today. How about you?
Not too bad. Just wanted to let people know that there's been a vehicle rollover on the Trans-Canada Highway just west of the Salmon Air line. A lot of traffic stopping and slowing in the area. Pretty dangerous. Emergency crews just arriving on the scene. So a lot of rain out here right now. It's pretty heavy rain. So people should you should never assume, but you assume it may be weather related to what happened to the accident, but it's the vehicle overturned in the median. From the commotion and everything else I've seen going on there, there may be some injuries. Not really sure of the extent of anything. Didn't want to stay there and get everything up too crowded as it was, so I moved along. But emergency vehicles are just showing up there now.
I appreciate the heads up. So just west of the Salmon Air line, a vehicle rollover. Obviously going to be some traffic snarls while they try to deal with the occupants of the vehicle and clear it away. So I appreciate the heads up, James. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. And of course, speed and hydroplaning, they do indeed go hand in glove, and it becomes even a little bit more difficult regarding safety when you're out on the highways, in particular traveling at highway speed, which is, you don't have to go 100 when the weather isn't conducive. But with the ruts, it's really hard to avoid being on top of the water, and it can happen very, very quickly, and you don't need to be flying to hydroplane either. But then what you see is people try to straddle the ruts. Yeah, that makes sense, because you know the associated risk with hydroplaning, so you straddle the rut. Consequently, you're either a little bit too close to the shoulder of the road, or a little bit too close to the outside lane, or the other lane. Anyway, so hopefully everyone's okay in that particular rollover. Let's take a break. When we come back, plenty of show left for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 4 and say good morning to the Regional Director for Community Sport for the March of Dimes Canada. That's Rebecca Bourbonnais. Good morning, Rebecca. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Good. Thank you.
So I understand there's a funding announcement, but before we get to that, I think the March of Dimes is one of those organizations where people think they know what they do, and unless you've been intimately involved with the March of Dimes, you're probably a little bit confused, because it's a big, all-encompassing organization working on a variety of different fronts regarding people with disabilities. So give us the Coles Notes who the March of Dimes are.
Absolutely. A lot of people might remember March of Dimes Canada as an organization where school children collected dimes with maybe their grandparents and sent them in to help fund a cure for polio. And that's how the organization started some 70 years ago. But we're still here today, vibrant and strong, 2,200 staff across the country, and supporting people with all types of disability.
And we had a conversation with the lady who's at the helm of the Brain Injury Association of Canada, and was talking about concussions and traumatic brain injury. And knowing that the Brain Injury Association here provincially has had to close its doors with the absence of the amount of money required, what role does the March of Dimes play to backstop the loss of that organization here?
Yeah, that's a great question, and sad that organization had to close. So we're certainly looking and interested in providing brain injury services. We provide them all throughout the province of Ontario, and we'll be connecting with government here to talk about possibilities of brain injury services for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that are affected and need those services.
So you mentioned that it used to be, and I remember going around the little March of Dimes cardboard box collecting dimes as a child.
Dating yourself.
Has that gone? Yeah, I'm in my mid-50s. Has that gone by the wayside in full?
Well, that was back when they were trying to find a cure for polio. So happily, that cure was found, and that's what that funding was for. So today we're working on a program called After Stroke, and how the fact that charities have always come to kind of the aid of communities. We came to the aid of Canadians when there needs to be a cure for polio, and now we're here today to talk about the need for support after people have strokes.
Fair enough, and we'll get to that. I might be conflating my UNICEF box with March of Dimes. I'm not sure because
maybe. March of Dimes. It was more of probably a little older than you.
Yes, I believe so.
70 years ago was when the cure for polio was found.
And it was also at that point in conjunction with the Marching Mothers was also part of that particular campaign.
That's how our organization actually got its name. Very interesting. Mothers marched door to door to collect just one dime to find a cure, and that's how March of Dimes Canada actually got its name.
Oh, I'm glad I said that. So talk about the funding announcement and some of the work you're doing for recovering from stroke.
Yeah, there's such a need for people that have had a stroke to have support. People receive excellent care in hospital, and then they return home, and it's a very scary and, can be a very overwhelming time for both themselves and their families. So our After Stroke program is that warm handoff between the great care at the hospital to returning back to home and community. And the program connects people with a real live person that supports them virtually to set goals and work towards their recovery and all the possibilities of returning to life,
When we talk about various illnesses, let's just say cancer, for instance, there'll be all sorts of support groups in place and all sorts of patient navigators. Is that the case with stroke?
The province is working on a provincial strategy, as a result of the Health Accord, there's so many great activities and undertakings. The After Stroke program includes that navigation piece. So, we're able to help people to navigate to supports and services that can help them achieve their goals, be it with March of Dimes Canada or other supports and services in the community.
Supports and services such as, because I don't know all the ins and the outs here, but access to a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. What else constitutes supports in the community?
So in each community, there's obviously different supports and services. March of Dimes Canada's After Stroke program's community-based. So, we might be helping people connect with the opportunity to improve their mental health, to improve their mobility, maybe to improve their language and speech after a stroke. Aphasia is a common side effect. So we have a variety of programs, services that respond to all of these needs. So depending on what somebody wants to work on, we're able to connect them with the programs and services that support their goals.
Talk about the disparity in services, rural versus urban, because it's quite different if I'm living in the city of St. John's versus a small rural coastal community.
Sure is, and that's why sometimes this After Stroke program might be the only resource someone has. In rural parts of Newfoundland, there isn't the access to, maybe an exercise group in the community. But with March of Dimes Canada, they can connect to a virtual exercise group. There may be not the opportunity for a peer support group with people that have had a stroke, but through our After Stroke program, there is that ability to connect with people all throughout the country that are in the same circumstances.
So do you also have a funding announcement coming with this call this morning?
Yeah, we are very, very pleased to let you know and to let everyone listening know that we just received $215,000 from the provincial government to continue our work throughout the province. So to expand the support that we provide, and certainly appreciate the opportunity today to talk to people and let them know if they've had a stroke or someone they love or care for has had a stroke. You can refer yourself to the program at afterstroke.ca. And aside from that, when somebody has a stroke, there should be information provided right at the hospital about our program, and they can be referred to it from hospital as well.
And I know this is not associated with the purpose for your call, but while we're talking stroke, it's always worthwhile to remind folks of some of the awareness, some of the symptoms, the early symptoms of a stroke, because you can indeed get help to maybe stave off serious implications of a stroke. And the acronym is FAST. And hopefully people don't understand what all those letters mean. And so it's if your face is drooping, you have weakness in your arm, you're having difficulty speaking, and then, of course, time. And if you can get to the hospital sooner than later, you may indeed be able to, again, stave off some of the real serious impacts of a stroke. Anything else you'd like to talk about this morning, Rebecca?
I think that you've covered it, and thank you for the opportunity. And if anyone listening has had a stroke or has, again, a loved one, someone they care for, please look us up at afterstroke.ca. It's a free program, and we'd love to hear from you. And as long as you have goals to work on, it doesn't matter when your stroke was. We're happy to be connected.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for the work.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
The same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Rebecca Bourbonnais is the Regional Director, Community Support, March of Dimes, Canada. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Margaret. You're on the air. Margaret on line number 3. Dave, might that pot be engaged? Good morning, Margaret, on line number 3.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I have a few questions this morning. I'm wondering about Veterans Affairs. Nothing too elaborate, but my father was one of 4 brothers who went to war in World War II. Thankfully, all of them are home safe and sound. But when my father passed away, the DVA contacted my mom to put up a headstone, a veteran's headstone, the tall gray one. But my mom already had a double one ordered for her and him. So they offered her a foot marker, which we did accept, even though it was only one, I think, that's in the cemetery. But it was there for like 5 years. And I called the DVA because I wanted to know how to clean it. I think it looks like it's made of slate, and I think the lettering on it was brass, but it looks terrible because it's all tarnished. I mean, my father died in 1988, and that was put up probably in 1990. But when I called them to find out how I could clean it, they said, no, don't do anything with it. Veterans Affairs are now taking names and grave sites in the towns, and they wanted us to take pictures of the grave site in the cemetery, and they were going to provide perpetual care of veterans' graves right across the island.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
That's 30-plus years ago. I haven't heard or seen, and the marker looks disgraceful. I mean, it's embarrassing. But I was wondering if there's anybody out there that actually had the foot marker that I'm talking about, because I haven't seen one, only the one that Dad has. I'd like to know how to clean it.
I know somebody who does indeed have a family member that's recognised with one of these foot markers, but you're right, Veterans Affairs Canada, and also includes the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, they take care of somewhere in the neighbourhood of like 120,000 veterans' graves, only associated with the First and Second World War. But I'll ask my buddy, and we have your number. I don't know if they clean theirs or they have any special tips to offer you, but it's an interesting question. I'd be hesitant to give you one because all I want to do now is give you some advice that leads to making things worse. So I'll make a call and ask him if he has any information.
And I got one other question for you.
Sure.
Do you or anybody who's listening know who is now representing the eastern Newfoundland or the Avalon Peninsula? I know when my father was alive, there was a guy that used to visit every 3 or 4 months to see how he was and if everything was okay. But Dad's gone, so I'm not a veteran, so I don't know who would be in charge, or who would you contact to find out who was in charge?
I don't know. Have you tried just straight up Veterans Affairs?
No, I actually haven't. I called them, like I said, about the foot marker, but yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, because I wouldn't know off the top of my head. I apologize.
Okay, I remember the guy that Dad used to see because he used to come out twice a month, lots of times, and just stop in for tea for no reason, right? A Mr. Facey, and they used to have fine yarns. But, I mean, like I said, my dad is dead 36 years, so. I guess things have changed since then. Probably there's nobody. You just have to contact when you actually need something, you know?
Yeah, and as opposed to calling Veterans Affairs, which couldn't always be a tangle when you're dealing with a behemoth like a government department like Veterans Affairs, maybe just the Royal Canadian Legion closest to you, they might even know.
Okay.
And that'd be
I
easier.
go to the Legion on Black Marsh Road all the time.
Well, there you go.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patty. Have a great day.
You too, Margaret. Take care.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break right on time. When we come back, Sam's here in the queue to talk about the recreational food fishery, and then we're going to talk about cigarettes. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Sam. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you today?
Doing grand. How about you?
Oh, not too bad at all. Paddy, I just wanted to bring up again the recreation fishery, which I was quite disappointed in when they made the announcement there late Friday evening. And I don't know what we're going to have to do to try to get some common sense in the people that makes those decisions, because they're saying it's the same as it was every other year. And I would have loved to have seen the change, only just a minor change into it, that you could go out every day when it was fine, things like that, right? Same amount of days. And even if you had to say, we got to give you tags or something like that, right? And keep a record of stuff, right? But for to come out again late on a Friday evening, hardly anybody, most people never even heard it, right? So I'm quite disappointed in that part that they didn't make that change, right? And especially for people that work weekends and things like that. I call it discrimination fishery, really.
Well, a couple of things. So, people can be concerned or frustrated with the fact that they just wait so late to make the announcement. And that's one thing. But when we compare the recreational food fishery dates and access to other parts of the Atlantic provinces, and in Quebec, then it's different. And just think about it. There's 39 days again this year. You can only go Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Might be one thing if you're someone who works on the weekend, but also if you're a rotational worker, that can jeopardize some of your opportunity to get out. Then you factor in what's inevitably going to be some bad weather days. In 2018, we had 46 days, and now we have 39 days. And considering the fact that they've talked about some sort of rebound inside the northern cod stock and the possibility to extend the commercial fishery up to 25,000 tons, then we've lost 7 days and we haven't progressed, period.
No, we never moved ahead, not one single bit, right? I honestly believe that we need 2 fishery ministers in Ottawa, one for the Atlantic provinces and one for out west, because I don't think they understand Newfoundland. Newfoundland is totally different from out west when it comes to the fishery. There's different issues and everything, right? And our weather is quite different from theirs. No. So I just wanted to call in, just say that I was disappointed with the decision again, right? No.
Now, I know the commercial harvesters are also pretty frustrated given the fact that there hasn't been an announcement on their quota as of yet. I've been told, I got an email yesterday from a fish harvester that said, people should consider themselves lucky as the recreational food fish harvester that they got their dates and quotas announced, because the commercial crowd are still waiting on theirs. I'm not sure what one has to do with the other necessarily, but you mentioned the tag system. Look, there's going to long be arguments. The commercial fish harvesters and the union are sort of wary of the food fishery. The thought is that there's too many cod being taken by the food fishers, but the anecdotal evidence looks like it's probably 1% or less, but that brings me to tags. I don't think people want the tag system. I don't think they want to be mandated to fill out a logbook. But if we're going to have the annual spat about who catches what, if we did it for one season, we'd have a benchmark. Say, okay, well, really, the food fishers are not taking very much cod, period, in the big scheme of things. So we could probably put that to bed, but I know full well people don't want tags. Every time we bring it up, I'll get bombarded here.
Oh yeah, I know some people don't want tags and things like that, right? But there got to be a compromise here somewhere or another along the way, right? This is not that hard to make a compromise. Holy jumping! And I know the regular fishermen do not want a recreation fishery at all, because he says it cuts in on their markets. No, so And you talk to most fishermen that I talk to and stuff like that, and they don't want to hear tell of it, right? No, that we shouldn't have a recreation fishery. I spoke to a person the other day. They got a B&B. She was waiting all year for the announcement. She told me she turned down about 100 bookings. That was people trying to plan to come to Newfoundland and everything like that, and have an opportunity for to go out in boat and catch a codfish. No, so I think they know when it's going to be. No, why put it off and keep putting it off until the last minute? And the only reason why we got that announcement Friday was so many people calling into your show, and then they just chose it out in the late in the evening. No? So hopefully next year we'll have a better season.
Yeah, we'll see. And of course, when there was a petition that was tabled in the House of Commons, obviously, and I don't think I heard one single peep from any of our sitting Liberal members of Parliament on that front. They were swinging for the fences, though. They wanted a huge expansion of the food fishery, and of course, didn't get it. It's exactly the same this year as it was last year. Sam, I appreciate the time. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I would just like to say, though, where it's the same as last year, I hope they still come out and clear up. If you got 5 people in your boat, and you got a decent-sized boat, that the 5 people are still allowed to have 5 fish each, just the same as last year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why DFO leaves that grey area in place, because they'll say the same thing as they did this year. It's 5 per person, 15 per boat. Yet I actually have an email that quite clearly says, if there's 5 in a vessel that's safe for 5 people to be out in, that no one's going to get fined or not going to be in trouble if you come in with 5 apiece. So I wish they would just clear that up. It just makes a lot of sense, so people know exactly what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, well, Paddy, thanks a million for even reminding people of that, right? Because that's still always a little bit of an issue with some people, a little bit wary about that, right?
Absolutely.
So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate yours, Sam. Thanks for the call.
All right, bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to Ward 4 Councillor here in the city of St. John's. It's Tom Davis. Tom, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Morning to you.
So Mon Hope is doing a cleanup this Sunday at Kelsey Drive, so people can meet at the Walmart. So it's a couple of PSAs. We've got the big Kenmount Terrace School Town Hall tonight with hopefully we're going to have Minister Studley, Abbott, and Education Minister Howell there. So I encourage people 6:30 p.m. till 8 p.m. at the Kenmount Terrace Community Center. Hopefully we'll have a big turnout. That's an important meeting.
I would be shocked if there's not a big turnout. Like, even since there's the relatively vague announcement about what's going to happen, there's still ongoing concerns with Lough Carl Academy and what's the other school right there? Larry's Brook.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's going to be some folks in attendance there that also have those questions, in addition to what's Kenmount Terrace going to look like. We have the grades announced, but that still hasn't satisfied all the questions people have. And the government is still referring to commitment to be open in September of 2026, which seems like a pretty compressed time frame. They say they can do it, but if we compare the size and scale of that school, it would be very much akin to Waterford Valley High School, and that was a 3-year project, so we'll see.
We will. Well, hopefully we'll see a lot of people out tonight. I'm going to be there. A big issue around the city is homes aren't being maintained. We had the No Mow May, which bled into June, and it's important. There's a lot of landlords who own homes, and the city has bylaws that can force homeowners to obviously maintain their property, but we really want to encourage people to realize that your neighbors, especially those who really, really take pride in their homes, it really bothers them when the next yard is a actual jungle. So, we want to encourage people, A, to get out and maintain their properties. If you're a landlord, please do it. The other challenge that a lot of landlords face is it's a tenant's responsibility to mow, but then, of course, a lot of tenants don't have the equipment or don't have the wherewithal. So I want to encourage landlords to think about maybe getting an electric lawnmower for your tenant and a properly sized electrical cord. A lot of people don't realize that you need to have a heavier extension cord to run electric motor like that if you have a longer cord. So for most cases, you want a 12-auge wire, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's going to cause your lawnmower to last longer. It won't overheat. And so, again, landlords, you've got to be part of the solution. And the other thing is neighbors, you don't know the situation of your neighbor. So if someone's lawn is is not being well maintained. Perhaps there's a health issue there. Perhaps there's even an opportunity for a young person or someone who's looking to make a few extra dollars to go around in the neighborhood and offer to mow people's lawns for a reasonable amount. So, that's a big thing, and it's something I hear a lot about, and I just want to encourage people to look after their properties.
Well, fair enough, because there's a distinct difference between a home that, works on curb appeal, keeps a nice tidy yard, mows the grass, cleans up around, versus what are absolutely some neighbours out there with very little focus on, even if they're not renters and they're the homeowners. It gets away from people pretty quick. Now, I have to say, when we had that stretch of really rainy weather where it was just impossible to mow the grass, I'd look out the window and be absolutely wholly embarrassed about just how awful my front lawn was. It was terrible.
Yeah, well, Fortunately, we got a bit of nice weather now. So I want to get into something that, when I've done cleanups at Mount Hope, they actually have a separate bag for cigarette butts, and I always wondered why. So I did some research on it. Cigarettes are the most littered item on Earth by quantity. Each year, 4.5 trillion cigarettes are put into the garbage, and it's actually the most abundant form of plastic waste in the world. And most people look at cigarette butts, I always thought they were like a paper or something like that, but they're actually a cellulose acetate, which is a man-made plastic material, which contains hundreds of toxic chemicals. And they break down into arsenic, which of course is a thing for rat poison, lead, which has all kinds of issues with brain, and nicotine, which is toxic. And in 2022, there was a study done on looking at the impacts on marine life. And marine animals constantly ingest these cigarette butt products, and it causes suffocation and also increased mortality. And they've now demonstrated, the same study, that the microplastics from the cigarette butts have been found in human tissues. So apparently cigarette butts have consistently accounted for 30 to 40% of all the items picked up in annual urban and coastal cleanups. So when we're going around and picking stuff up, and I know from firsthand knowledge, those little white little butts. So, it's amazing, because I never really thought about this until the research on it. I'm hoping the residents find it interesting, but they actually can be recycled separately, and they can be made into pallets and different things that they use plastic to do. But I want to encourage residents, don't throw them out the window, don't throw them on the ground. Make sure they find their way. If you can't recycle them, which is challenging, make sure they find themselves into a proper garbage receptacle and they get properly disposed of. For all the reasons. Not to mention, of course, cigarette butts thrown out to the window can be the cause of a forest fire, which obviously we're struggling with that already in Labrador, and I know we've had a couple of forest fires around the province.
Well, of course. We've even talked about sparks coming from the mufflers of ATVs, and absolutely, if you're driving alongside a very dry patch and you flick your cigarette butt, it could absolutely be the spark that ignites a fire.
Last week I was in Gander during the real hot weather, and it's amazing. In St. John's on Thursday, our high was 29 degrees. Which is 3.4 degrees higher than the previous record for that day, which is a very significant difference in temperature. And so, again, just kind of bringing this all full circle, the impacts of climate change and all that stuff, we all can do a little bit, and picking up the cigarette butts, picking up our garbage, maintaining our lawns, and maybe considering going from a gas-powered lawnmower or gas-powered whippersnipper or whatever else to electric can all be part of that solution. So I hope everybody has a great day and enjoy your week.
Appreciate the time. Thanks, Tom.
Take care. Thanks, bye.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, so near the bottom, I guess, of the preamble this morning, sometimes by-elections are eye-rollers. They're kind of sleepy affairs, no big implications necessarily speaking. I don't think that could be said for the results yesterday in Toronto St. Paul's. The Conservatives have taken that seat back from the Liberals. The Liberals had it for 31 years. What that means, what was behind it, we'll get the perspective offered by the host of the Tim Powers Show. Tim Powers, right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to a good friend of the program. Sometimes sits in for me, but has his own show here on VOCM, the Tim Powers Show. And the host is Tim Powers. Morning, Tim. You're on the air.
Well, I'm in a better mood today, I suspect, Patty, than Justin Trudeau is. Whoa, what a stunning result in Toronto Centre, or St. Paul's last night. Crazy.
It really is. Now, like I said before we went to the break, sometimes pundits like yourself, and maybe I'll put myself in that category, will look for any opportunity to gin up these results, right? To really sensationalize what has happened. But I don't think that could be overstated on this front. I mean, just for context, not only has the Liberals held that seat for 31 years, Carolyn Bennett, the outgoing Liberal member, won by 24 points in 2021, and the Leslie Church, the Liberal candidate, lost by 2 points. That is a tectonic shift.
Yeah, it is, and you're right. Look, people do gin up by-election results, but there's nothing that can capture the damage this has done for the Liberals that isn't accurate today. It is huge. I mean, it is fair to say if the Liberals can't hold St. Paul's, which was a safe seat, as you just described, for 31 years, it's going to be tough to hold other safe seats. And as I'm sure you saw this morning, both on social media and chatting to people, the questions are coming heavy and hard at Justin Trudeau right now about what he is going to do. I don't know how he can continue to hold that he can stay on, because I think, Patty, what we saw in Toronto, St. Paul's last night was a referendum on him, because Leslie Church, I know her, she's well regarded, good local candidate, but it had little to do with Leslie Church and everything to do with frustration I think people have with Justin Trudeau, including Liberals. It's the most worrying thing for a political party when your own voters and supporters aren't with you, and that appeared to be the case in that by-election last night.
And I think even provincial Liberals here feel the same way. I mean, the signage for some of the most recent by-elections wasn't the big L, it was Team Fury, which is a difference. It might feel like a hair split, but that's obviously a calculated change.
Yeah, and that was the same with the signs there. You only saw Leslie Church's name on the signs there. Look, fair or unfair, it's politics. Justin Trudeau, who was well regarded 8-9 years ago in just about every part of the country, is disliked intensely. And whether it be people looking at him because of affordability and feeling that they're on the pinch, or because they're paying more at the gas pump or paying more for food, he's getting blamed for it all. What was fascinating in that riding was the other little subtext, as we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but that riding has a pretty healthy Jewish population, and they were not happy with the way the Liberal government has been handling itself over the war in Gaza. They don't feel that Trudeau has been firm enough on side with Israel. That was one thing. The other thing that apparently played out there that I'm hearing from people in that riding is the issue of the capital gains tax increase, the inclusion rate increase, because there are a lot of business people in that riding, a lot of entrepreneurs in that riding who are going to be directly impacted by it. So that was supposed to be, as you know, a policy that the Prime Minister announced that was going to win him support and curry favor, particularly among young people. At least in this riding, that was not the case, according to some of the early analysis that's coming out of there.
Cost of living, rising home prices, inflation. I mean, yes, absolutely. And the Prime Minister will rue the day that he said he doesn't think about monetary policy, even though, I don't think we necessarily need Prime Ministers dwelling on monetary policy. Of course, the creation of reasonable fiscal policy relies on an understanding of monetary policy, but he really did stick his foot in it on that particular one. But, of course, I'm not across the country. I can only read the tea leaves from here. Because some of those issues, there's no real actual political levers to pull, but on a couple of fronts there are. So whether it be some of the culture war stuff when we see whether Pride Month and the trans issues and stuff, but immigration is going to bring the government down. It truly is. Immigration is going to be critically important for a variety of reasons in this country. If you have an honest look at the aging demographic, and yes, some labour shortages and all the aforementioned, but with housing top of mind and access to healthcare top of mind. And this is not to scapegoat an immigrant, because many immigrants will come and be immediate contributing members of society, but this is going to bring the government down, and they can't seem to recognize it. I just don't understand. Like in this province, I guess maybe it gets exaggerated somewhat because only 3% of the province are immigrants. Some of them have been here well before Justin Trudeau was in politics. So why do you think they can't recognize this very fundamental concern that Canadians have?
Well, and that's a key issue, but that's their bigger problem. There's a bit of collective delusion at the moment. They're still living in this place, whether it be immigration, whether it be tax policy, whether it be environmental policy. The immediate cadre around Justin Trudeau, including the Prime Minister himself, believes that at some point over the next year, Canadians will awaken and discover the Pierre Poilievre that they've seen in the House of Commons 15 years ago. As they would describe him, the nerdy, pugnacious opposition MP that curries no favor, doesn't win any support. That delusion carries through all of the policy measures that they have. On the immigration, you're absolutely right. We need it, but when you talk to young people today who can't get homes or people who are looking for employment, two of the group that both those cadres blame are immigrants. Unfair, but that's what's happening, and they blame the government for it because they opened up immigration, which they should have done, but didn't exercise the necessary supports for all of that. So it's every issue for Justin Trudeau is a problem, and a lot of it gets down to the way they have communicated it, and the fact that people who once listened to the Prime Minister are not listening to him, and they're not listening to the Finance Minister. So when your messenger can't get heard, or you only hear negative things coming out of the messenger's mouth, you got a problem. And that's what I suspect many Liberals are going to try and communicate to the Prime Minister and his team. Whether they will be successful or not, who knows?
And to separate politics out of it for just a second, when we talk about the reality and the fallout of some of the commentary we hear on things regarding culture wars and trans issues and gay rights, we'll leave that aside for a second, but on the world of immigration, the problem then becomes is if people are willing to blame immigrants for their lack of ability to get a doctor and or to buy a home or whatever else is going on, whether it be cultural issues that are brought, traditions brought to the country, the erasure of the Canadian values, whatever they might be. The problem for me is clear. I could be standing in a line at the clerk or the teller at a grocery store, and I'm the sixth person back. There is a brown person in front of me, a white person in front of them, another brown person in front of them, and another white person in front of them. The immigrant might be the white guy, right? Because now all of a sudden, someone who might be a doctor or an oncologist standing right in front of me, but that's how people identify immigrants, is their language, their accent, and the color of their skin. So now, consequently, on the ground, inside society, we've got a demonized segment of society that may have been here for decades. They maybe have never voted Liberal in their entire lives, but that's how it seeps into people's mindset, which I think is a bigger problem than the politics of the day.
Oh, you're absolutely right, and look how it's playing out in the United States. But it's happening here in Canada. It's happening in Newfoundland and Labrador, and just extrapolating from that point, the way politics has been played, and Justin Trudeau, it's not just Pierre Poilievre who does this. The people have been played against each other, and it's wearing on people, but it's entrenched within people as well too. And despite a lot of the things the Prime Minister has said about bringing people together, look at the speech again. I'll go back to capital gains tax. Look at the rollout Chrystia Freeland did about that. Oh, we're going to have gated communities if we don't do this because the so-called 1% are going to need to keep the wrath and angry people out. If you don't move forward with capital gains tax, well, women won't be able to get birth control. That's your deputy prime minister saying that. So, that seeps into the collective mindsets and makes people angry. Nobody's trying to solve problems. They're blowing them up and creating more divisions. And I think you saw frustration play itself out last night in Toronto with some people, 42% of the voters in that riding, saying we've had at least enough of that for now. The only other thing I'd add on the by-election, which was fascinating because you watch these a lot too, the turnout was up. Oh, yeah. That's not a good thing for the Liberal government. That's usually a sign of change if turnout is up. So there's a lot to take away from there, but the biggest lesson is for the Prime Minister, you, sir, do you understand that right now everything's a referendum about you? You are the lightning rod. That may not be fair in your mind, but that is where it stands for the Liberal Party of Canada.
Inevitably, I'll get an email saying, no, people are only, disgruntled about illegal immigration. Well, immigrants don't wear badges or buttons declaring their citizenship, right? How do we identify who may indeed be here undocumented-wise? And that's a problem too. I mean, because that is happening in the country, and we have no idea what those numbers look like. Very last one, because I got to get going. I've had a keen focus, in my own mind anyway, about the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, forever to be known as NSICOP. Every single politician, and I don't think there's anyone that stands outside this criticism, has bungled this. Whether it be Miss May with There's Nothing to See Here, folks, and Jagmeet Singh talk about there's a massive problem and there's potential treason out there. Even the Prime Minister sitting on it since March. And Mr. Poilievre's inability or unwanting to get a top security clearance. Should we just ignore every single politician on this one and allow for Justice Hogue and her commission to take care of the next steps? And I mean, just that doesn't even include the fact that the RCP weren't looped in here initially. Yep. So should we tune out politicians on this one? Because I have.
Yeah, well, that's what's going to happen, because it's only Justice Hogue who's going to do anything about it, it seems, at the moment. Then it'll go back into the court of government. Just picking up on that. All the politicians, as you know, always say they come together after something tragic, whether it be 9/11, whether it be, the attacks on Parliament Hill and the attacks elsewhere that have happened over the last 15 or 20 years. Why can't they come together now and do something at the front end to address the challenges that are there? But on security, agree with you 100%. Massive failure by all the major political party leaders to take a leadership role as opposed to nibbling around the edges on partisanship, because they may be worried about what might come out and embarrass somebody in their party.
Yeah, of all people to be this quasi voice of reason is Francois Blanchette. Like, how does that happen?
Exactly.
Tim, I've got to get to the news, but I appreciate your time.
All right. Take care, buddy.
You
Bye.
too, man. Bye-bye. All right. So, yeah, if you want to talk about the implications of the by-election, what have you, and every now and then when Tim is on, and maybe on his own shows, the fact that he has been an understood conservative pundit on some of the national media shows, but inside of that conversation, didn't really feel to me like there was any sort of untrue or unfair or over-the-top sort of review of what's happening in the country, and, of course, in Toronto, St. Paul's last night. Let's take a break. When we come back, the Fogo Island Ferry. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. Janine, you're on the air.
Hey there. How's it going?
Doing okay. How about you?
Good. Just calling back to do a little bit of a follow-up, I guess. After last week, when I called in, you had kind of brought up the Bell Island Ferry, and I wasn't super well-versed in it, and just did a little reading and research just about the ferries on Fogo Island and wanted to give a little, my 2 cents worth on it. So basically, okay, I'm going to read you a review from, I think, TripAdvisor for the Bell Island Ferry. And it says, what a wonderful, cheap day trip for family with kids or people wanting to get off the beaten track. We boarded the MV Legionnaire, a brand new ferry, and had a wonderful 20-minute trip where we saw whales and diving birds. All this for a few dollars. Be sure to get off and walk the beach, explore historic Bell Island. Then we have employees knew what they were doing, very efficient and polite, nice, uneventful ride, can go to the deck or stay in the car. The price is for both ways. We have beautiful views off this short ferry ride, well organized and a really good price. Confident staff got everyone on and off board quickly and safely. This compared with, let's look at the Fogo Island Ferry. The most disorganized service we've had in years. Traveled an hour and lined up for an hour to be told they were full. At the very least, they should be able to let people who are lined up know their status. At best, have a prepaid reservation so we are assured access. Actually, may have been lucky not getting on, as subsequently we heard that getting stranded on the island due to full ferry returns is not unusual. Good luck. Then we have by far the worst ferry experience in North America. Zero communication, no organization. You pay for your ticket only to realize you won't be getting on the ship. Get there 2 hours beforehand and still don't make it on the boat. Next boat is in 4 hours. No amenities for patrons waiting for the next boat. Not even water or vending machines. Real third world vibes for this service. Be prepared to waste a day.
Are Yelp-type reviews really an actual reflection of the service? For instance, talk about amenities. There's none on either side of the Portugal Cove on either.
No, but I think I'm getting to my point. My point is that when you are traveling to Bell Island, it's pretty accessible from the Avalon Peninsula. You're not looking, it's not super, super off the beaten track. When you're waiting for a boat to Bell Island, I don't know what the likelihood of missing a boat is because I'm not a statistician, but if you do miss a boat, you're looking at a 40-minute wait. And so you're likely to get onto the next boat versus driving to Fogo Island to get to the boat. You're at Farewell. You're going to get there at least an hour before the boat. If you miss the boat, you're going to add 3.5 hours to that. So at that point, you're at 4.5 hours. And then if you're not getting on the next boat, which is definitely the case with the capacity that they're running with now, you're then looking at, 7.5 hours, 8 hours. And I think when you were looking at the Fogo Island ferry, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I bet in the history of the Bell Island boat, people have not waited 9 hours to get on the boat. And for Fogo Island, that's normal. That is not outside the norm. That happens to lots of people. And so the point I'm getting to is that, you mentioned the Bell Island ferry versus the Fogo Island ferry. I think what people have forgotten is that those two boats are assets of the government. The Legionnaire doesn't belong to Bell Island, just like the Fogo Island ferry doesn't belong to Fogo Island. Those are assets of the provincial government. And, in the last call, I said, well, I don't have a solution. I don't know. That's the government's job. And I took some time to think about it, and the government probably does need help because they're inefficient and not really getting much done.
Just
but
one second. Janine, I specifically mentioned Bell Island. I don't know why I didn't grasp this one. The reference to Bell Island was very simple. The only way to replace a vessel the size of the Legionnaire is with the veteran. They just so happen to be on those two individual runs.
I'm about to get to that point. So my point is there should be an assessment of need and urgency with the boat. Those two boats, or all the boats that are in the roster that belong to the Newfoundland government, or as I said, are assets of the government, not belonging to a specific island, there should be an objective assessment of need that takes into consideration many factors. And so, I think there's obviously a great need on Bell Island to have a boat. But again, if you were running with two smaller boats that were maybe not as fast, the implications for the people who are coming and going from Bell Island are just not the same as they are for Fogo Island. It's not even comparable. Waiting for an hour versus waiting for 9 hours is not the same. And then I also think the urgency of need is completely different. From what I gather, most of the working population of people on Bell Island are working off of Bell Island. So they're commuting. And so their boat is obviously very important, but it is a commuting boat for most people, which means that those people also have access to the things they need in St. John's or on the Avalon Peninsula, which really reduces the transport truck crossings that are going to Bell Island. Everything on Fogo Island is coming in on a truck and going out, including, all the goods that are coming out of the Fogo Island co-op. So I think when you look at the type of traffic and the volume of traffic, it's very different. And so, if you have some sort of objective assessment of need, then the boat with the larger capacity should be in the place where it's needed. And, I think Bell Island would be able to run still pretty efficiently if they were sent, as an example, the Beaumont Hamel and that other smaller boat, and the larger boat was sent to Fogo Island for this peak time. And again, the government can assess that. That's not up to the people to decide or someone else, but I think the functionality of the boat is completely different. On Fogo Island, those are essentials of life that are coming back and forth on the boat, whereas on Bell Island, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you have the same volume of transport truck, goods and services coming across to the island. The urgency is not there because people have access as they're working on the mainland. And Fogo Island, that's just not the case.
There's still commercial traffic, not the same volume as Fogo Island. I think everyone acknowledges that. Some of the wait time issues is directly related to the travel time period. I mean, to go across a Tickle, it's about 20 minutes versus to service Fogo Island, Change Islands, Farewell. Obviously, that round trip takes far longer than the 20-minute spin across the Tickle.
So therefore, wouldn't you put the boat that has the larger capacity and the ability to move faster in that channel in the place where it's needed?
Okay. Okay.
So, I started with those reviews because I think that's like just, a microcosm of what's actually happening out on Fogo Island. And it's funny to read it and see it there. So I think there's that. I think the government should have some sort of an assessment and start viewing these boats as an asset that's going to be put in the place where it's needed. I think that would be a help. And then I have a couple of other points to make.
Quickly though, because we are late, but go ahead, a couple of quick ones.
When you get to Fogo Island, to Farewell, there's no cell service. There is no cell service. There is no internet. If you are, in the very lower part of the lineup, sure, your phone may work. There are things the government can do to make this better for people. Go provide cell and internet service in this place. If you're going to be stuck there for 9 hours, could your phone at least work? There's no access to food. So if you're expecting that you're providing a service where people do not have access to food and water, is the government okay with that? I don't think that's okay, and those are a lot of the comments on there.
But to that point, Janine, point, you're talking about putting the appropriate boat on the appropriate run, given volume and need and wait times and the like. I think if we're talking about government efficiency and a careful review, also for government to be in the business of putting up cell phone towers to service very few people is also a business case debate that has to be undertaken. The government has put recently a ton of money expanding cell coverage here in the province, and yes, there are some really
I'm not talking about the province. I'm talking about the people who are expected to wait in a lineup for 9 hours. I'm not talking about where they're expanding their cell phone network, which is great.
That's what you just said, though.
I'm talking about there. So, that is an issue. That's a grievance people have. You get there, you're waiting for 9 hours, your phone does not work. That is not okay. And again, access to food and clean water to drink, that's not okay. And then the other thing is people are wanting to leave vehicles and walk on, but are not doing that because of a security issue with people coming and vandalizing cars, stealing parts from cars. They're not even setting people up so that they're actually able to leave their vehicle comfortably.
Okay.
And then one of the last points I'm going to make is that your website, the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador's website, update your website and have it reflect what's really going to happen. Put a warning on there. Put a warning on there about the actuality, the reality of the ferry service. You could be there waiting. Come prepared to the lineup. Don't come, if you do not have water and food, because you could, people deserve to know what's actually happening in the lineup. And again, if you're a tourist from another place, you have no idea. You go out there, you have absolutely no idea. I think the government, their website should reflect the service they're providing. It should be clear, and it should be honest, and it should be transparent, and give people a warning, a travel advisory, a travel warning about what you are going to face. You are going to face unduly length of waiting time, and you're not going to be provided with services that you might need, such as access to food, water, internet service, cell service.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
No problem.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, the Canadian Association of Pharmacists just wrapped up their inaugural national summit to get reaction as to what happened and some of the recommendations made. Is one of the executive members at panel. That's the Pharmacists Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. Dr. Cara O'Keefe is next. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. And earlier this month, the CPHA, the Canadian Pharmacists Association, concluded its inaugural national summit. Join us on line number 2 to discuss the summit and the recommendations made is Dr. Cara O'Keefe, executive member at the Pharmacists Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. Good morning, Dr. O'Keefe. You're on the air. Hi, Cara.
Going?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me this morning.
Happy to have you on the program. So the key focus here was the role of pharmacists in the future of primary care. Talk about some of the conversations had, then we'll dig into some of the recommendations.
Right. So on June the 6th, the Canadian Pharmacists Association held a summit basically looking at the future of primary care in Canada. So as we know, primary care is a very hot topic right now, not only in Newfoundland and Labrador, but across the country. We see patients who are unfortunately going without appropriate access to primary care. And ultimately, this leads to, longer wait times and poorer health outcomes. We see our emergency rooms are blocked up. And, as a society and as a country, we are really putting our heads together and looking at how we can address this. So we know that pharmacists are very well positioned to be doing more to help the primary primary care of Canadians, and we're also trained to be doing a lot more than what we're doing in Newfoundland and Labrador right now. So one of the main topics that we brought up is how we really need to position pharmacies as access points for primary care right now across the country. The reality is that most places right now that would be, a primary access point for primary care would be, a family physician's clinic or a nurse practitioner's clinic. And unfortunately, there are many Canadians and Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that don't have access to a primary care provider. So, in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're estimated that about 125,000 people do not have access to a family physician. And across the country, it's estimated that around 6.5 million people do not have access to a primary care provider. So it's a big problem. And we know that pharmacists are well positioned to be, providing some of this care that patients need. So we need to better be able to allow people to do their jobs and allow pharmacists to care for their patients.
So talk about playing a more prominent role as the first point of primary care. So how is it working currently in this province, and how should it change? Because we can talk about expanded scope of practice, talk about the use of innovation and a variety of things, but how does it currently work for pharmacists, and how should it work?
Right. So right now in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have luckily seen progress with regards to the pharmacist scope of practice in the last 5 years particularly. So we see pharmacists taking on bigger roles when it comes to managing patients' medications, when it comes to administering vaccines and other injectable medications. One place that we would really like to see more uptake on is managing chronic diseases. So we have a whole lot of evidence showing that when pharmacists can manage patients' hypertension, that it saves our healthcare system money, and that it also decreases our hospitalization secondary to heart disease and to stroke. So that's something that pharmacists are very well able to manage. Also assessing for a broader range of common ailments. So right now in Newfoundland and Labrador, pharmacists can prescribe for about 30 common ailments. Only 11 or 12 of them are actually reimbursed through our provincial government. So that means that, patients are having to pay out of pocket for some of these services that pharmacists can provide for them. The other things that we'd like to be able to see, really enhanced are conducting health screenings and also providing health education and advice for preventative health measures, and not always, just using these reactionary ways that we generally tackle our healthcare.
Also talking about improving licensing pathways. This is fascinating. I don't know if you know this number, but licensing pathways for recent grads, we could talk about tuition burden and what have you, but on the national front, when you compare 2013 to 2022 with all healthcare professionals, doctors, family doctors, specialists, all the nurses and occupational therapists, physiotherapists, pharmacists have the highest percentage of internationally trained healthcare professionals in the country. So back in 2013, 27% of pharmacists were the percentage of total supply were internationally trained. In 2022, it's 35%, which I find to be fascinating. I would have guessed that would have been a doctor, but apparently it's a pharmacist. So before we get into tuition relief for students, what do we need to see on improving the efficiency of licensing?
Right. So right now our licensing pathways, particularly in Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's not just in our province, it's in many other provinces, are quite convoluted. So we really need to be working together with our regulatory bodies and our government to make this, one, less complicated for people looking to get licensed. So if, I, even as a pharmacist who speaks English, were to go on the internet right now and to try to research how I would go about getting licensed as an international graduate, it's quite a convoluted process to go through. And that's for someone, who has experience in the profession, and for someone who also speaks English as my first language. So we need to make sure that we have resources for those individuals. That's very important, because these pharmacists could be, contributing to our healthcare system and also enhancing the health of our province. And that could be true, across the country. In Nova Scotia, we've seen their regulator and the provincial government come together to make these pathways more clear and to expedite it for some pharmacists from particular countries. So it would be great to see something similar happening in Newfoundland and Labrador as well.
And I know you would agree that the patient-centric focus needs to be the key inside of primary care, but you also talk about collaboration with other healthcare professionals. So when we have, that's the term we put on it, the collaborative care clinics, what's lacking on that front, and what role do pharmacists play inside those clinics?
Right. So right now, one of our big issues is actually, like, many other healthcare professionals, is recruitment and retention. So while we do have pharmacists in our primary care clinics, 1 or 2 pharmacists for clinics that have, 3,000 to 5,000 patients is really not enough. Most of the patients who are in these clinics are taking medication. So as pharmacists, we would argue that wherever a medication is used, a pharmacist should be present. So all of these patients should be attached to pharmacists within these clinics, and they're community pharmacists as well. So we also need to work on recruitment and retention of pharmacists, both in the community sector and within our hospital settings and in other areas. So, we really need to work with government on that. We often hear people talking about our shortages of physicians and nurses, but pharmacists and pharmacy technicians need to be included in that conversation as well. Looking at tuition is also important. So right now, a pharmacy student's tuition is comparable to that of a medical student's tuition. So we need to look at ways to offset that as well.
100%. I appreciate the time, Cara. Anything else quickly before we take a break for the news?
Like I said, I think we really just need to make sure that we are increasing access to care for our patients. And at some point, I would argue, we're really obliged to make sure that we're using the skills of all of our healthcare professionals to their full extent. And pharmacists in particular are in a great position to improve the health of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
Appreciate your time as usual. Thank you, Dr. O'Keefe.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Dr. Cara O'Keefe is executive member of the Pharmacists Association Newfoundland and Labrador. Okay, so we've had some calls and some questions and concerns voiced by members of the FFAW about the integrity of the election. Mark Dolliment is the Elections Committee Chair. He joins us right after this. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the FFAW Elections Committee Chair. That's Mark Dolliment. Good morning, Mark. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. How about you?
Pretty good, despite being up well past my bedtime last night. But
yeah, me too. All right, so we've had some calls and emails, concerns regarding the integrity of the election. People talk about the nondescript ballots themselves that can be easily copied. No union number needs to be applied. I know it's secret ballot, makes it hard to manufacture real pragmatic rolls inside of secret ballots. But what protections are in place to ensure the integrity of the election? Because the reasons people have put forward are legitimate concerns.
Yeah, I've heard most of them, I think, if not all of them, Paddy. And, while at face value it may appear that, there's not adequate security measures in place on these ballots or the return envelopes, I can assure you that that's not the case. I mean, there's been a great deal of work both by the Elections Committee and the staff collectively to make sure that this election has been done in a totally fair and transparent and democratic way. And I guess you mentioned the ballots, I guess the printing of the ballots and the numbering of the ballots, I guess, if you want to put it that way. So I'll address those first. But I just want to say, I mean, the printers that printed these are, very familiar with printing ballots with security features built into them. And while it may appear that you can take it out and photocopy it, I can assure you that the metallic ink that's used in the production of these ballots and the bled watermarks that are on it do not make it I won't say impossible, because I guess if you were a professional printer, you may, but for your average person, it is not possible to reproduce these ballots to the point where we wouldn't be able to identify them as non-original. And as far as the reproduction of the ballots, it's not only the ballot itself. It's important to consider the election process. One ballot per self-addressed return envelope, and that envelope is important as well. And it also has security features in its own right, including the Canada Post indicia that's on it, and the barcodes and the numbers that are on the envelope. So, just because you can reproduce a ballot doesn't necessarily mean that you can have it returned as a counted ballot, because the envelope itself is as difficult, if not impossible, to reproduce as the ballot itself. As far as the ballots having some sort of identifiable mark, be it a number or something to indicate the membership number or anything like that. I mean, as per the Constitution, and I think of most democratic elections, the fundamental right is to a secret ballot. And of course, anybody who identified the fact that there was no markings on these ballots would probably be the first one to question if they were marked. Can we be assured of a secret ballot? I mean, of course, if they're numbered, there's always going to be the question of whether or not that number is traceable to a member and whether or not that member is going to compromise their right to a secret ballot. So we've looked at this many ways, as has been done in previous elections. We followed the Constitution, and we feel as though this is extremely transparent and fair. And I think if you were to sit down and look at it and we stood in front of a photocopy machine, I would be able to demonstrate to you that is the case, Paddy.
Okay, well, I mean, that's what we're looking for, some of the protections that are in place. So, and I was going to ask this question anyway, but someone just sent it in via email as well, is we understand that only members in good standing with their dues paid up are eligible to vote. How was that evaluated when you sent out the ballots in the first place? Did you only send it out to folks that were in good standing, or you sent it out to everybody? So, because that can jeopardize the vote accuracy.
No doubt about it. I mean, again, we follow the Constitution of FFAW Unifor as an election committee, and it clearly states that those that are eligible for nomination for the positions and eligible to be on the voters list are those members that are in good standing. And FFAW Unifor, of course, set their requirements of what constitutes a member in good standing. So to answer your question simply, yes. Only members in good standing, card-carrying members, were eligible to be nominated, and only those made it onto the voters list. And people were given the opportunity right up, I think, until May the 21st or something like that to get their any arrears dues paid and make sure that they were on the voters list for this election.
Let's talk about the actual process upon ballots being received. So is there some sort of third party, like in political elections, we'd have scrutineers in place regarding all the different candidates and the different parties. So what exactly happens when you receive a ballot? Is there an independent party? Where do the votes, where are they kept? Those types of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, the self-addressed return envelope that I mentioned earlier goes back to a post office box that only a third-party auditor, Quinlan Barrett Boland, have access to. They have the FFAW Unifor election ballot box on their premises. It's locked. I hold the keys in a locked location, so they'll collect the mail or the ballots as they come in the mail. They'll go into the ballot box. They're held by that third-party auditor until the morning of the 24th of July, at which time the box itself will be transported here to the FFAW main boardroom, where the elections committee and the scrutineers of any candidate who would like to have a scrutineer present will be opened and counted in public. So, we want to make sure that this election is fully transparent, and we're going to go to make every effort that we can to make sure it's as transparent as possible.
So will you have, for instance, examples of a photocopied ballot, examples of a manufactured return envelope in place so that the scrutineers can see the difference and identify them easily?
Well, absolutely, and we will go through a very regimented process on the morning that the ballots are counted. One is to go through and make sure that the envelopes that are received are legitimate original envelopes. The envelopes will be opened. Each ballot will be scrutinized to ensure that it's an original ballot. Any inconsistencies will certainly be looked at by the elections committee and any scrutineers that are in the room. But I don't anticipate any issues here, Paddy. I mean, the process is fairly straightforward. We feel that we have all the necessary security measures in place to make sure that this is a fair and uncheatable, if you want to put it that way, election. Anybody out there who says that this election is fixed or bogus or not being done transparently, I think the members of the election committee and the staff that work so hard to try to put the election process in place extremely disheartened and take that stuff personally, because we've worked extremely hard. We followed the Constitution. We've put every possible measure in place to make sure that this election is done in a way that we can stand up at the end of the day and say this was a fair and transparent and democratic process. And I've got the utmost confidence that we're going to succeed in doing that.
Is there an ability for formal appeals or challenges, whether it be to individual ballots and or results?
There is. Again, we refer to the Constitution and the Constitution of FFAW Unifor when it comes to elections, be it the nomination process or the election process itself. There are allocations there for challenges and then appeals beyond that. So we simply follow the rules and procedures as laid out in the Constitution if and when we receive a complaint.
I appreciate the time this morning, Mark. Thanks for doing it.
No problem. I appreciate the time. Paddy, have a great day.
You too. Take care and bye-bye. Here you go. Mark Talbot is the Elections Committee Chair at the FFAW. Let's see here. Let's take a break. When we come back, Jim's got a bouquet to toss. We'll see to where or to who. And Paul wants to talk about a class action lawsuit. Olive wants to talk about the rise in the number of drinks being spiked in social settings. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Jim, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi there.
Yes, hi. Paddy, I want to, on behalf of a branch 64 out in Holyrood, Royal Canadian Legion branch, give pass a bouquet, or the biggest one we can, to Mary Walsh, who recently come out and put off a benefit show for us to raise some funds for the branch 64 Legion. As you know, legions across Newfoundland and across Canada are challenged to raise funds in our present environment, and the legions aren't supported as much as they used to be financially, and to say someone of Mary Walsh's caliber takes the time to come out and put off a show which was appreciated by everybody present. It just speaks so well of her, and shows that not only does she talk the talk, but she walks the walk, and she come out and put off a show for us on May 25th, which was just great, and it was successful financially. And I just want to pass on to her, on behalf of our President Ed Smith and the whole executive, the great job she done, and we're just delighted that she would take the time and take the effort to do it. Right?
Absolutely, because it's becoming more and more difficult to fund entities like the Royal Canadian Legion, which is a terrible thing to be able to say out loud, but it's true. So good on Mary.
Yes, absolutely, and it come about. There was no big push and shove to get her done. She had some contact with our bar manager, Alice Flynn. They met at one of the local swimming holes over in Conception Harbour, I think it was, and some conversation, this and this and this, and she committed to doing it, and she lived up with the commitment and come and put off a show. Our Ladies Auxiliary put off a lovely meal, and everybody was very, very pleased. And from the time she stepped into the building and walked through the audience and went up and took the stage, she had her hearts, and everybody there loved it, and it was just really, really, really nice. And once again, to commend her for taking the time to say, I give a damn. I want to pass on the well-being to the people that are we're all trying to respect her for what they've done for us, and she really, really did a great job.
I'm pleased to hear it, Jim. Thanks for the call.
Okay, and thank you for your time, and thank you for taking my call again.
Anytime, Jim. Stay in touch.
Bye now.
All right, bye-bye. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, Olive. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for taking my call. I know you guys are busy. We're at the end of it, so I'll try to make it quick.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to try to make this really quick. It's a very painful situation. I don't really want to be making this call. I'll try not to cry. Okay, I'm going to just start quick. All right, I got married at a very young age. I had 2 children. My husband ended up on drugs and left me alone with 2 children. I had to pay a mortgage, bills, food. I didn't have any help. I had no family. I had nothing. I ended up dancing at a club downtown to make money to pay for the kids and everything. And I didn't do anything. I didn't do any drugs or anything like that. Anyway, after a while, my husband ended up getting joint custody, and it was week on and week off. When they were with me for a week, I didn't work. When they were gone with him, I would work. But I was calling child services constantly, telling them they shouldn't be with him because he was dangerous. And I was out of town working, and I got a call from them saying that they found something bad happening when they were with him, and they took him into custody. I couldn't get home. I couldn't get a flight fast enough. So they took him into custody, and I couldn't get him back. I went to a lawyer. I paid a retainer, and I know I did paralegal. I know what lawyers are, and he asked me what I did for a living because that's normal. They want to know that you can pay him, right? I know all that. So I thought everything's normal. Now I'm sitting down crying and trying to get my kids. I'm in very much distress. I'm sitting in his office. He's sitting across the desk from me. There's a door behind me, and there's that stage, you know, they have like ice water to get you a glass of water or something. So he just got up and went behind. I figured he was just going to get me a glass of water because I was distraught and crying. And then I heard a door lock. By the time I turned around, he had himself, to make it not sound as bad as that actually was, exposed. And when I turned my face, it was actually almost in my face. And I was so upset I couldn't do anything. And I left. And I carry so much guilt because I didn't do anything, and I know he's still practicing. And when I remembered everything, and I got a hold of another lawyer, and he's friends with that lawyer. And he told me I'm a effing liar, and that he didn't do it to me, and I felt like I was raped all over again, and that happened last week. And now I got to be involved with victim services, and RNC, this is the last thing I'm going to do. And I got to carry around this guilt forever, knowing that these people definitely did it to other women and other young women, because they didn't just do it to me. And now, that's it. I can't be quiet about it anymore. It's wrong. These people should not be practicing. And the roofing downtown, with the RNC's advisory to watch your drinks, you got to watch your drinks. Because I was roofied 20-odd years ago, and I didn't know what happened. I got pregnant, and I didn't know how. They did it, and now I know how, and I was roofied, and I got pregnant. I was impregnated, and I don't even know who did it. And I had to have an abortion. And everybody, please be careful with your drinks. If you're going downtown, have a buddy with you. Have a buddy system. Don't leave your drinks unattended because people are doing really things.
They are.
People need to be careful, honey.
We're probably going to have to move to having covers on drinks and just using straws or what have you. That seems like a practical way for the bars to try to control the issue. And it could be in any social setting. Sometimes the focus just lands on George Street, but it can be anywhere. And that's the reality.
All the bars, right?
Okay.
But the RNC was like telling like bar owners and like bouncers, waitresses, if the drink is unattended, throw it out. Now, my man used to work at Lottie's downtown 20 years ago. And that wasn't in place, but if he's seen a drink unattended, he poured it out. And that's what they're telling everyone to do right now. But you're right, at least cover it. Like, buddy system is always good, too. You don't want to be out alone, right?
Right. Olive, I can hear the emotion in your voice. I appreciate your time. I hope you're doing okay.
I'm doing my best, Patty, and thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. You take good care. All right, there we go. It's an issue. I mean, covering drinks seems to be the way. Because when we talk buddy system, some people hear that as blaming the victim, when that's what nobody's trying to do that. Final word goes to line number 4. Paul, you're on the air.
Hello, Mr. Daly. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. How about you?
Oh, I'm not bad. You're a fellow Riceman, and your parents are from St. Mary's, where my mom came from.
Yeah, my dad is from Riverhead. Mom's from the Cove.
Okay, mother's from St. Vincent's.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I just want to call, Patty, I don't know, I just want to put out to the few people that are affected, which I am affected. I worked in the criminal correction system for over 28 years. I'm retired. And I'm suffering with leukemia now these days, which shit happens, you know. But I spoke with a legal firm, and that's the nature of my call, that's dealing with legal cases from the Christian Brothers and the priest from years back.
Mm-hmm.
So I dealt with that firm and stuff, and I won't mention names because I'm not going to put myself legally out there, which I don't mind. But when I filed the case and everything is settled, there's no payouts yet. They tells me that they can't even answer my name. Like, not my name, I take that back. But I can't even call them. They tells me to call an assistant. When I go to speak to them, I can't even speak to them.
I mean, they should be able to answer your question at the very least, even if it's not the answer you want to hear. If all the legal wrangling hasn't concluded to come up with compensation packages or whatever the case may be, then just say exactly that. Because everyone's going to find out at the same time. But when people have questions, and especially about such traumatic issues, then just fundamental answers are certainly what's required. And Paul, simply because of time on the clock, we're getting close, but offer anything else you'd like to say before we have to say goodbye.
Yes, I'll say one more thing, Paddy, if you don't mind, and I appreciate your time. I dealt with, like I said, I've been in the legal system a long time myself, but a lawyer is charging 40% of what I should get. There's something wrong with that.
The lawyers certainly do very well in class actions, no doubt about that.
Right now, I just wanted to state that because 40% of a victim, which I am a victim, shouldn't have to pay that 40%.
Fair enough, Paul. We've run out of time, but I appreciate yours.
Okay, and good talking to you, my son. You make sure you keep the Christian name, not from Brother Rice.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Right, there we go. Bye-bye. All right, we're out of time. Good show today, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you want to get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.